Did you know about that?
No.
Good evening, everyone. Very true. Time is 6 o'clock. Wait a minute. The time is 6 o'clock, and today is December the 21st, 2021. Calling into order our briefing and work session. We have a pretty fair agenda for the entire night, and hopefully we can dispense with it in a most expeditious manner. First thing that we have on the agenda tonight is receiving our city manager going through the consent items. Ms. Farrell Benavides.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Item 4A on the consent agenda are your minutes. Quite a few minutes from August 14th, 17th, 24th, September 7th, September 21st, October 14th, November 8th, November 11th, November 16th, November 13th. November, again, 30th. Goes backwards, I just mixed it up. Kristen has been busy, to say the least, but I think you have quite a few of those. Item 4B, yes, sir, please.
Just with the minutes. Could I get my name spelled?
It's Ms. Bell.
It's misspelled? I'll fix it. Sorry, sir.
That's what I think.
Right. Any other? All right, item 4B, that's our FY 21-22 wastewater pipe bursting contract. Every year, the city executes a wastewater pipe bursting contract to repair structural and capacity deficiencies on our current sewer, private rainwater, and our groundwater inflows in the infiltration. I can't even say words today. System. So, get it all down. Let's slow it down. And to reduce the treatment costs. And so the cost of the contract for FY 21-22 is $996,996 and was budgeted in the FY 21-22 utility CIP program. The annual wastewater pipe bursting is part of the city's SSO mitigation program with the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. The city is contracting with Vortex through a cooperative purchase agreement. They previously performed the pipe bursting work for the previous 2 fiscal years. The contractor is located in Houston, Texas.
One thing of note on this, when you look at that dollar amount, it is a little staggering. But in the package, the details are, this is over 9,000 linear feet. This is almost 2 miles of pipe throughout our city. And when you examine that in terms of the map that was provided to us in the package, just seeing how extensive this amount of work is and the nearly 2 miles of work that has to be done, it's an understandable dollar amount. You know, initially it's a little bit of sticker shock, but understanding that as well, the almost 2 miles of linear feet that has to be done. Mr. McBurnett.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I guess one of the other little comments I guess I want to make, I looked for Mr. Ramey. I don't see him.
He's on vacation.
We have Ms. Jackie.
Jackie Cole.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. But my understanding is because we had an SSO issue, but we have not had any SSO issues because we have been doing this process.
You're absolutely correct. The number of locations where we have sanitary sewer overflows has decreased. And so we're able to see the fruits of all of this work that we're doing. And it, you know, when we have sanitary sewer overflows, that creates a regulatory issue for us. And so this is one of the items in our toolbox that we have to alleviate those overflows.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Ms. Copeland, the pipe bursting map that I looked at, does this represent pipe bursting that's going to happen in all 5 districts?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So truly a citywide.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I'll stop this.
No, but go ahead and finish.
Okay, no, but I was going to say that locations are not dictated according to, you know, the council district.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
It's based upon just the need.
Yes,
Purely by necessity, wherever
Yes,
those issues have.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. So our second, 4C, seamless mobility contract. The purpose, this is a resolution authorizing the 3rd-year option to renew for an additional 1-year period beginning November 27, 2021 and ending November 26, 2022. The purpose of this contract is to provide large-scale construction and maintenance activities related to maintenance and/or upgrades of the city's traffic signals, school zone flashers, and other infrastructure maintained by the traffic division. The cost of this contract for this fiscal year is $156,610 and was budgeted in the traffic operations budget in our budget. This is the third of our 4-year renewal option. The contractor is located in Dallas.
And it remind me on this one, is this the one that, when we talked about maintenance with the city of Dallas, did we lose one or did we add one? Remind me, I'm trying to remember the.
Dallas will be adding one. So when we had there was a request from them that we would add an additional one. And so at the end of the day, they agreed to not only, they're going to add and maintain it themselves. So there is no impact to us. So initially, the discussion was they would construct it and we would take over maintenance. At the end of the day, they found because we would have them to do our equipment on that traffic light, that it was easier for them to put their own equipment in that they have their contract for. And so they would do installation and maintenance of that signal on Cedar Ridge.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
All right, the next one, 4D, Consolidated Traffic Control Contract. The purpose of this contract is to signal-related parts and materials such as signal bulbs, batteries, wiring harness on an as-needed basis to perform routine maintenance. The cost of the contract for FY 21-22 is $85,376 and was budgeted once again in traffic operation. The city is using a Houston-Galveston area Council of Governments HVAC cooperative contract for this procurement, and the contractor is located in Arlington. And this is another resolution. These are all annual resolutions to renew our contracts for an additional year. These are the parts that we use in the signals, and sometimes they're more difficult to find, especially in this contraction season. And our procurement officers here if you have questions on that.
No, I just want to thank you for adding the cities in which these, I know it's in the detail, but thank you for publicly saying where they're coming from, where the vendors are coming from.
All right, last and certainly not least, item 4E. It's another resolution authorizing the purchase of traffic operation equipment and supplies from Paradigm Traffic Systems using by-board cooperative purchase agreement. The city maintains 34 signal intersections. The purpose of this contract is to purchase traffic signal computer hardware on an as-needed basis to perform routine maintenance as well as to replace 3 traffic cabinets in FY 2022. The cost of this contract for FY 2022 is $91,800 and was budgeted in our traffic operations budget. The city is using by-board cooperative purchasing agreement for the procurement action. The contractor is located in Arlington. As I mentioned, there's 34 signals. I know the question that came up about the additional signal. We do have a cooperative agreement with the city of Dallas where those intersections overlap between the two cities, and that's where we do the sharing, but we do have some that are solely maintained by the city.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 2A, discuss and receive direction on uses of the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds provided through the American Rescue Plan Act, also well known as ARPA. Carol Benavides.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Today, this discussion is a continuation of a discussion we previously had regarding the funding which we received from the American Recovery Act. Jennifer, who normally will take the lead on this discussion, is actually out this week, and so I'll be giving you the presentation. Objective. This is an overview of it. We've also provided you a spreadsheet to talk about some of the items previously mentioned. We are getting additional items as we speak. American Rescue Plan Act. The $1.9 trillion act was signed, as we said, on March 1st, 2021. $360 billion reserved for state and local aid to mitigate the fiscal impact stemming from the public health emergency. $65.1 billion was dedicated for the cities. City of Duncanville is to receive $9.6 million. It's received through the Texas Department of Emergency Management based on the Community Development Block Grant process. We have received half of our payment as of this date. That money is sitting in the bank. One of our concerns, and why we're making this discussion right now, is that we do know that we do have to expend this money and we are entitled to another half. All funds must be committed by 2026, but the funds must be committed by December 31st, 2024 for the first half. Guidance and eligible uses were determined by the U.S. Department of Treasury. 4 basic areas in which you can use this in. Respond to COVID-19 for its economic impacts. We'll talk about that. Provide premium pay for eligible essential employees. Replace revenue loss due to COVID and invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructures. So we also previously talked about some of the criteria and what are the things that have been recommended. Criteria 1, as we talked about before, 1 was with our economic development, a small business grant. That is to assist our businesses who've been impacted through revenue loss and other areas from this. And so that grant would be administered if it's approved when we get to that by our economic development department. We know we had trouble in the past and getting people to participate, and that's going to take an active effort by us to make sure not only we're getting the messages out, but we're helping people with assisting in filling out the forms and making sure that we're tracking this. And we have a pretty good tracking mechanism, but we do have to be careful of how we do this. Other areas that we've talked about, HVAC ventilation improvements, because we know it's an airborne-based thing, some of the HVAC improvements would fall under, and we have HVAC needs. We currently have about, we know it's an airborne-based thing, some of the HVAC improvements would fall under, and we have HVAC needs. We currently have about, we know it's an airborne, that was fun. Some of the HVAC would fall under, and we have HVAC needs. And we currently have about, excuse me.
I was gonna ask you to repeat that.
It's a dose of Christmas past. Okay, there we go. Okay, tutoring programs, digital literacy. One of the programs that we're going to be talking a little bit more is working with our community college, Dallas College, on some educational programs. We're looking at right now a leadership program in conjunction. I had a meeting about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about what can we do for our youth to provide the leadership training and some other educational opportunities. Great chance to invest back in our youth. No-touch bathroom, things that we still, as we think things are getting better, you've got, I'll give you an example, the city of Glen Heights has shut down again. They've gone back into all virtual because they've had so many cases. And so, we can't stop being careful. Outdoor equipment, we want people to be out, but looking at some of the things that we can do to create that. Mental health response, we know the importance. Fire purification, library. So all those things to keep our operations functioning, but also to make sure that we're providing for it. Second use, premium pay, and that's something we're going to talk about, and I'll talk about the breakdown of where it is currently. $500,000 retro premium pay for all employees. The CARES Act funding, the original Act funding allowed for essential workers pay, but the way the Department of Treasury presented it, they kept changing the guidelines. So most cities in Texas said, it's too much, it's too complicated. There were too many changes to make it known. Initially, it was all essential, which meant kind of your public works, your police, your fire, public safety, police and fire. Well, then they said, well, you can't do it across the board, and then you got to do it by the hours. Then they went back and they changed it again, and they kept providing additional guidelines. Now, the key is, you got to wait to the end before you really knew what you could do. By the time it got to the end, it went back to the original. This time it's a little bit simpler, and we'll talk some more about what the other folks are doing. It's a tiered approach of doing this, but our other cities around us are actually doing this right now, so that's why I wanted to bring that to your attention. Other is revenue loss. So we get to calculate that basically we have revenue loss. That means there's funding that we can capture, put back in the budget, that doesn't necessarily have to fall in the criteria. We have calculated that we're eligible to charge back to our budget $944,104 in revenue loss. Now, what does that mean? That's how much, when they give you this formula, you put it in, Ms. Adina and has worked with them on it, that money just goes to the budget and you can appropriate it for projects. Now, there were some projects that we had listed in our budget we weren't able to cover that they're asking that we can cover through some of those funding. Last idea is when we start to talk about our water, sewer, our broadband infrastructure, automated meter system. That's one of the projects that we've been talking about. We have started, we had a kickoff, another meeting on our AMI project to get a briefing on what other folks are doing. And we know that we've got to move forward with it, but these are some projects that can go. The SCADA pump, $83,000. Relocation for broadband, some things about IT things, water, sewer, There's lots of water sewer that can be covered by that because water is essential, as they've determined. And so there are projects that we will be able to do that will help. The same thing with our IT, because where we are now is we realize that broadband and IT access is very, very important to us. One of the issues we were finding with our AMI implementation and why we were looking at radio versus cellular was based on our cellular coverage. Well, cellular is the best technology, but we just did not have it. So those are some of the things we can focus on correcting within this process there. So why are we here today? Because we don't want to, one of the decisions I recommend to you guys early on is that we don't jump into this making decisions on who and what we want to spend everything for. DeSoto, for example, our neighboring city, they have appropriated everything, but every day we learn more. And I just don't want to start going and just saying, let's go and make decisions on everything until we get all of the ideas here. But what I am concerned about were some of the areas that we can cover immediately. As we were faced with our issues last year with the ice storm, we found that we had an issue of generators. We didn't have power. And so some emergency purchases that I think are vital as we kick off this winter season are our generators. And so that is why I'm bringing this to you as we see the need for things. We know that City Hall, the police station, both Fire Station 1 and 2, and the service center are in need of generators. And so that is one of the requests that we want to look at moving forward with. There's also some other equipment for adverse weather. We did an emergency exercise that was very well done with our fire department and our senior team to talk about what do we do if next year we have a harsh winter. Now, we're hoping we don't, but you never know. And so we were starting to focus on what did we learn, what did we not have, and we wanted to, because they could be covered with this funding, to focus on that.
So the question on the generators, I love the thought. The City Hall, police station, fire station, all essential for sure. What about our citizens? What about a generator that if our citizens needed assistance? Because we did run across that last time as well, where we didn't have a place for our citizens that had a generator that could house the temporary as well, whether it's the library or whether it's the field house. So talk about that generator as well. That will also help our citizens.
Yeah, I made a note on the library as well, because we needed a warming station. I think that was the term that was being used. And we didn't have the ability to create a warming station in the city of Duncanville as a result of not having the ability at the library. Now, other cities that were using libraries, in fact, DeSoto started with their library but found out they couldn't handle it, and then they had to move it to a church, and then the church couldn't handle it, and then they shut it down completely. So as a suggestion or recommendation, maybe to include the library in
Well,
that.
would you say the library or would you say the field house? Because the library has a little bit more concise space versus the field house.
Either one. Whatever would be the best place to consider where to put a warming station, it could be done.
Can I ask
Library.
Mr. Rhodey? I thought
Yeah,
they already
sure.
have one.
Sure.
The library and the recreation center both have a generator that will power both those facilities. Our problem last year was finding staff.
It was staff.
Okay,
I just
there, because I was like,
remember.
I thought we just said we had one.
I
Okay.
just remember, we didn't have enough people to run it.
Correct.
They couldn't get out. They were, never mind. I just remembered it. Oh, another thought.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. Well, with that comment, then can you make somehow a footnote for later to come back and say how do we? Because we have all the generators, but how do we staff it later? Whether it's through volunteers or whatever, or partnership with churches, organizations. So can you footnote that for later to come back to tell us how we do? We can have all the generators.
I would love to, because I think if you don't mind, I'd like to do a briefing on our first conversation at our next full council meeting on our emergency plan, because we did say we want to work closer with our CERT, and because we want to have folks lined up to help. We also are looking at even this year, if staff has to stay over, they're going to stay at the library. So there's going to be staff at the library, and so we actually have come up with some of our plan, and I think it'll be good to bring this to the citizens and the council so that they know what we're planning for this next year.
Okay, thank you.
Another thought that I had about this one was, I recall that we had trouble getting diesel. So we're getting very low on our diesel to even power the generators.
Sure.
So this is more of a logistical and environmental thing. Can we or should we consider the possibility of creating in-house diesel tanks
Reserve.
at the two fire stations and the police station, so that we don't, I think, was it that the trucks couldn't get out of the depots. The depots were running out of fuel. to bring diesel. It was just a massive gridlock of being able to provide diesel. And I remember we were almost in an emergency situation where some generators were almost out of diesel when we finally got something. So maybe a suggestion to think about, can we put some diesel tanks close to these generators for some backup rather than relying 100% on delivery?
What I do recall is our problem was at the fuel pumps that we have down there off of Danielsdale was there was no power. They could not power the pumps to pump the fuel. So that's why we're having issues with.
And we're doing the service center remodel, which will actually, we will be redoing our fuel, and so that's gonna help too.
And I believe the internal tanks on the generators that we do have that are limited in their capacity are smaller than what you would get with the newer generators today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was they just didn't have enough amps to push what we needed to do. And, here it was unprecedented. We knew we had generators to power lights, but we didn't have generators to power HVAC throughout the entire buildings. So here it was, we were confronted with something we never had to think about before. So now we're gonna cover it
Yes, and
very
so,
well.
but we will do I would really look for an opportunity to just let you know, because I think the planning, the process is moving forward, and I think it's fair to come the first week in January at our first meeting to really talk about our plan for emergencies, and even the role of council. Where will you be? Where do you go? How do you get information? And we'll have that fleshed out by that time.
An outlier question. Looking at, you just iterated that these things change day by day by day and what the government was going to require in terms of documentation.
Yes.
We have all been aware of the cost of documenting anything that the government tells us to do on a new basis, especially with accounting kinds of things. And it's personnel costs that we didn't necessarily budget for. There were unforeseen, unanticipated additional costs strictly for documentation going upstream. So I'm looking at this and seeing this as, are we including in any of this the additional costs for city staff to account for all the stuff that the government's wanting to do?
I need to see if we could capture it. Actually, we could probably capture that under revenue loss.
lost revenue.
Right.
And so we-
They're essential.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, because it ain't cheap, for every, crossing all the Ts and dotting all the Is to make sure that uncle is not gonna come back and say, okay, we're grabbing this money away from you because you didn't do your line right.
Yes.
So I'm looking at personnel costs to make sure that we can do it well and not have any concern about that yet, correct?
I hear about all these, I guess the unknowns that occurred during this last event. Of course, I wasn't involved, but in previous years, isn't there a yearly or maybe every 6 months testing of the generators at all the facilities?
Yes, sir. They're on ours, it's tested every month. And I believe that's what ASA does throughout the city. They test them every month, make sure they got fuel, make sure they run.
Make sure that they run everything they need to be running in the building.
Right. It's like Station 2, that generator will not power the entire station. What happened before was the cold was so cold that it ruined the electronic board in there that transferred the power over. So the fire station had no power for 36 hours.
So not to get too far off subject, but are the proposed generators some that will run the whole facility? Okay, so that'll be a first for us then.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the whole point of these new ones.
Thank you.
And there's work that we'll have to do for the buildings to make sure that it's able to power the building, because some of the buildings weren't structured or set up for it. So there's a lot that goes into it, so that's why that dollar amount is so high. All right, adverse weather equipment, I think we mentioned that. Body camera vests, that was something we proposed. We see the importance because our people are out. I will even go back to contact tracing. Our health inspector, fire marshal, staff in our neighborhood services group, all with body-worn cameras, just like our police and fire, because there's access and there's contact and they're going out, and we want to make sure that we're covering that. I want to move forward with those as quickly as possible, because more and more when we're, as I think the mayor mentioned, that group is sometimes they have as much contact with citizens as our police and fire in some cases, because they're daily going out there. And so we want to make sure we're capturing those interactions and that information, and it's very important to us. Questions? Second area is essential worker premium pay, and this is a little bit more complicated, and what I did was I just followed up to make sure I had it correctly. As I mentioned, they didn't do this during the CARES funding. This is a little less complicated. Right now where we are is DeSoto is doing, it appears they've approved and actually have dispersed. There's a conversation in there that says the average mean. And so it's a tiered approach. So for example, up to the average mean, anyone who makes up to 84,000, they are getting a flat $3,000. Anyone who's between an average mean of 84,000 and 100,000, they're getting 2,500, and then anyone above 100,000 is getting 2,000. In Lancaster, what they're doing is they did a little bit different. They did a flat one. Public safety, public works, and recreation received 2,000. All other employees, whatever level, are all 1,500. And then we get to Cedar Hill. Theirs is going to be very similar. They have proposed this, and they haven't actually approved theirs yet, but they're at 2,000 for public safety, public works, and parks and rec, and then 1,500 for all others. Now, this doesn't mean everybody in the city. So what it does is, and the way it works is, it's based on time worked. So if you were employed from April 1st, 2020 to March 30th, 2021, you're entitled to the first distribution. For the second distribution, it's April 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2022. Now the question then comes up about people in partial years. It's then divided up into quadrants. And so you have to be there for that whole section to be eligible. So that 3,000, for example, would be divided up, for example, if you did it in 3 sections. Anyone from April to July would receive, if there was a 3,000, 1,000 for each quadrant. And so that's how it's calculated. And that would be with HR. That was where the complications came in before. It was really based on hours worked. So the issue with the other funding, and I'll use an example with the CARES funding, it had to be specifically hours based. So it wasn't, if you were shut down and you had no one at work, they weren't at work, that was working from home. It was about the public time that you were there. If you were coming into this building, and so what would happen with police and fire is you may have had someone who was on 2 weeks vacation or they were out sick. We calculated based on their timesheets how many hours they served, and that's how you calculated how much each person would be eligible for. So it is not easy to do, but it's doable. It's a nice spreadsheet. I actually have the spreadsheet that we would do this. The reason I wanted to bring this to your attention is because it is being rolled out, and you see it more in cities like us where we're competing and someone hears that they're doing this in one city, they're going to say, well, why didn't we do it? Because we were exposed. And so I want to bring this to your attention. Now, all of this will come back to you because I don't have this as a decision maker on my next first meeting in January, first full meeting in January, if I feel that this is something you're in favor of for approval. Questions on the premium pay portion of it, because it's a lot more complicated and I can send out more details if you need it.
Not a question, but a comment that I don't want us to walk away thinking that because you've cited what other cities are doing and other cities are considering, and you're still in the process of considering, that we're late in the game.
Yeah.
I don't believe that we are. This is so essential to make sure we do this right.
Absolutely.
Using other cities as examples, saying, okay, this is something we might consider, but I'm not coming away with this thinking we're behind the 8 ball and getting this done. I think that you're exercising an extreme amount of due diligence to make sure we do this right. I just want to make that comment.
I want to be very careful with this.
And I would agree with you. Thank you, Mayor. I would agree with that as well. And I hope, and though I like the city aid that you talked about, I would hope that you would look at the essential workers and make your own plan as you talked about that.
The amounts probably won't match theirs because there's a difference in disparity in amounts. But we will come up with our own plan, and that's what I bring back, but I just want to make sure that I give you the detail in case you hear about what other folks are doing. I'm not going to stop with these 3. When you see my plan, and it'll be based on what's happening kind of regionally. My biggest fear was when I first heard this with CARES is that they come back and say it doesn't count. And so even talking to Mr. Porter in Cedar Hill today, his concern was, I don't want to approve to move forward too quickly with anything that if they come back and say it's not covered, that we wouldn't be able to cover it within our own budget.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be too aggressive. Normally I like to, but I also realize that as they change, that one idea that we didn't think of may come forth, and then we've allocated all of the money. I don't want to go too slow, but I want to make sure we have as much data as we can. And so that's where the low-hanging fruit, as I call it, things that I know we need to do that I would like to strongly recommend.
Just coming back, we have to commit to the expenditures by December of 2024. Does that all, and we have to spend it by December of 2026. By committing to it, Are there things that we're going to be actually make expenditures on prior to 2024?
Yes.
Or do we have to wait until we get coming up on that deadline to actually go buy the generators and buy the cameras and buy the stuff?
So 2024 is everything. So that's the whole 9.6 million. So by that time, if you're looking at 2024 because of the way, and I will ask Adina in our procurement, we're just concerned that we will get to it and we have to have everything in place and purchased by 2026, which means that if there's something that's out there and it's not in, that money has to go back.
Got it, okay.
Last part of it, some other things were some license for, that will help us with our geographic stuff for police and fire 2,500. The library, which has been an active place that we're keeping folks using, so we want to make sure that we have items that are there, carousels, air purifications for the fire apparatus, ultrasonic face piece cleaner. Same scenario. You're out there, you know, we're realizing more and more we're having to do a lot more cleaning. And then the cellular unit pump station. And that's because we've got to make sure we got the relay and communication. We've already been warned that January is going to be tough. And from what I'm hearing, it's getting tough already. But I think we have been careful and we continue to be careful. And so these are the things that we wanted to bring together right now. But this does not stop this conversation. And so I'm going to be bringing back some other items to you, but I also want to make sure that they are in the best interest of the city at the time. And you may have some ideas from what you've heard, and citizens may have ideas of things that we need to focus on that are going to help to make our city safer. That is it.
Okay. A lot of work to be ahead.
Yes, sir.
And we thank you for the detail and for
And the big spreadsheet.
this and for the.
You should have received the spreadsheet electronically so that you can also look at it. If you don't have it, I will resend it, but I also will, you'll see some other things starting to add. For example, the program with Dallas College, that's going to be added.
So I'm sorry, the last thing, did you say you're gonna present those items that you sent back to us in the next council meeting in
Our
January?
next full council meeting in January, if the consensus from you all is that it's okay to bring it back.
Mr. Coates.
You mentioned that the literacy, the digital literacy training with the college. And on here it said it was with the library, so I was wondering how that works.
So there's the library portion of it, but I also, and that's why I said some things that aren't on here that I've been working on, is we're also looking at about $20,000 to do with our youth, because we focus a lot on our babies, but we got some young adults here that need workforce training. And so our goal is, with the proposal I received from the Dallas College, is to see how to fund a young leadership program. And it's an opportunity to workforce training and all the things that we need, because part of what's happened is when you go to places, you see that they're having a hard time with employees. I mean, my public works vacancy is high, and so we're looking at how do we get our youth in Duncanville work ready. And so part of that funding in there is what we're looking at is adding some funding just for the teenagers and a little bit.
So is that different from the digital literacy training?
It's going to be added in. The literacy training is part of it. We're going to add in more for that.
Okay, thank you. Item 2B, review of the city's fund balance for the utility operating fund. Soundmore.
Mayor and Councilmember, there's no presentation, but what I want to do is kind of take y'all guys back to the budget season. This discussion is over the utility fund balance. During the budget discussion, there came up the fund balance for the utility operating fund. There was a difference. We had on spreadsheets that we were using, it was like a 7.8 million. But when I went back and looked through the city's utilities, not the utility system, but the finance software, and also looked back at the audit, I saw that we had a fund balance of 16 million. And so I know there were questions regarding that from council about how can we have a difference of 7.8 million here and then 16 million, I find 16 million. So what we did is that I did my due diligence and actually went through the finance system on every fund. I also went through the CAFR, the financial report, the audited financial
We
report.
don't use that acronym anymore.
I'm sorry, yes, you done got me on that again, Mayor. My head or my mouth, whatever. So the financial report that we have for the city. So when I looked in there and confirmed that the fund balance that I could see was 16 million versus the spreadsheets that we're using for budget purposes was 7.8 million. But we still came up the question, well, why was there a difference? And so doing the due diligence, I looked at the spreadsheets, I looked at both the things that I had at my disposal to kind of confirm that. And I couldn't find a reason for those variances. And so I wanted to make sure going forth that we had a process in place and that what I was reporting, what I found was accurate. So we asked Gradient Solutions to come in, who they're internal control specialists. They're not auditors, external auditors, but they've been doing this for a long time, and I've worked with Gradient Solutions before. And so what we want come up today is that what I've looked at, they've also gone back and taken a look at. And I'll just let them tell you from their perspective what they recommend, and then we will kind of give you what we recommend on going forth into this next budget season, how we're going to calculate fund balance. With that, I'll give you Calvin and Calvin Webb.
Thank you, Council and Mayor, for having us here. I'll be very brief. Again, I think Adina did an amazing job summarizing it. So she had asked us to come in and again put a second set of eyes, which a lot of times is good, right? As you think through things and you transition. So we spent less than a day just to kind of glance at all the documentation she sent, the spreadsheets, supporting documents. And basically suggested there could be multiple paths to do. The one of which Adina had already come up with was, the pass is the pass. We want to move forward in the process as what she had come up with. And us looking at the information, it seemed like a reasonable approach. Again, we didn't audit the information, we didn't try to validate it, but we put a quick set of eyes on all the information and came back and passed our thoughts along to Adina. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions or run through any points that you may want to hear about.
Yeah, looking through your report, it mentioned that there were some discrepancies in the formulas that were in the spreadsheet.
Sure.
Did you give us those correct formulas that would fix those problems, or do we have to figure those out on our own?
No, so we have an Excel sheet. So basically, there's a lot of things you can do to find those, but we just simply, the first pass is normally to use Excel and look for errors where a division problem might have changed, or there's a reference issue. And so I actually do have a long list of those cells that have that, which I'm happy to pass along to Adina. So
okay, yeah, that was a question. I was looking through that and I feel like, okay, and I work with spreadsheets a lot. I know you can make a quick, easy mistake in a macro or something like
exactly.
that.
And the longer, historically, the longer you use a spreadsheet, the more likely it is there's risk. It's just a reality. Yeah, having been an auditor in my past life, that you're always careful when you receive Excel sheets, right?
So the bottom line is we really have 16 million.
Yes. Yes, sir. We really do have 16 million. That has been verified. They've used the same tools I've used to verify that. And so there's tools that any of us can go look in. You can take your financial report that's been audited today and go look there, and you will find that the fund balance for the utility fund is 16 million. So that's where we conclude from all of this research and studying that we've done on the spreadsheets.
Yeah, Mr. Cooks.
So clarify that for the citizens' sake, because when I hear that it showed 7 and it showed 16, in our heads we're already thinking, okay, great, we have more money. So make that clarification a little bit. Explain that clarification some more. Well, and then when you do, I'll just go ahead and fill my second one out. Is that something that the council should have known as it was brought to us? So you can just hit both of those here.
Okay. Well, the 16 million versus the 7.8 million, what we discovered, it was in a spreadsheet. And as you said, some of the formulas might have broken, what they were carrying from year to year. We recognized from our research that, someone had just carried over from year to year on one spreadsheet. It was pretty voluminous. It was a big spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. So all I could think of is that when you carry something over from year to year, sometimes if you don't go back and look at your financial system, this is one that's supposed to carry all of the accurate data from actual expenditures and revenues that come in, then that might not be the most accurate fund balance.
The error compounds itself over time.
Yes, so over time and over years, and the spreadsheets that we were looking at that we had been handed down were over several years. And so to go back, to answer your question, to go back and try to fix the errors would take some time. And so we had to decide, I did construct my own spreadsheet based on Munis, the financial software, and based on the financial report, and review those fund balances to see if I could recalculate the fund balances that I got from the audit as well as from Munis. And I got the same 16 million that I had in both sources. So what we can conclude from that, we can go back and spend more time in trying to figure all that out. But the bottom line is that we don't really know how that got carried over. We'd probably have to guesstimate, and we'd probably end up back where we are today after spending any more time on this. And so the best we think we can do is take it from here and go forth and have a more solid process of determining and calculating your fund balance. And
The variance was between the budget spreadsheets and the actual accounting processes, or the ledgers, I would say.
Yes, sir.
So the ledgers are what gets audited
Yes.
annually. The budget spreadsheets don't get audited.
They're personal.
So what happened was that y'all found this discrepancy between our actual dollars being presented through our accounting system and the budgeting software that's being used.
Yes, sir.
So if that's the case, should we then set up something that's reviewed every 3 to 5 years to make sure, regardless if you're switching over leadership or not? Is that something you need to review every 3 to 5 years?
You verify your fund balance every year, and that's when I came into the organization, that's one of the first things I did to make sure your balances that you're rolling forward, that you say you ended, especially when you're in budget season, you have to make sure those are accurate, because I need to know what I'm starting the year with and what I'm ending the year with in balance. And so how you can verify it going forth is basically look at your CAFR, I'm sorry, not your CAFR, but your financial report.
Yeah, but
Can I say something different just to tie in? So a lot of times, like when I do a budget, if you don't have a really good financial management system, you go ahead and develop it on a spreadsheet and then you just throw it into the financial system. But the official document is your financial system. And so, for example, I create spreadsheets all the time, but the key is it has human error in it. It's my personal. But the key for people is if you have a good, which now you do, you have a system. So now when you get your reports aren't from an Excel spreadsheet. We're getting our reports directly from Munis.
Okay.
And that's what we weren't doing. Because, remember, it goes back. Before you had Munis, you had an older system. And so when you have an older system, like they have Encode, and Encode was horrible for me in my old, when I've used that. That's part of Tyler. And so I would do a spreadsheet and just enter it in Encode later. So your financial, your budget reports you would get monthly were not coming from Munis, they were coming from the spreadsheet. We need to stick with the system. That's why we bought the system, and now we're trying to make sure we use the system and give you data only from the system. So the reason your audit was correct is because your audited data came from the system. It was just your monthly reports that were not coming from the system, they were coming from the spreadsheet. We gotta move back to using the system, that's why we purchased it.
Mr. Gutierrez.
just very quickly, I think you touched on my answer I'm looking for here. Tell us again how the auditors didn't catch this. Because I'm not blaming the auditors. I heard what you said, but could you clarify that?
So the auditors they don't care about your budget. Basically, there's one page in your financial report on budget versus actuals, but they don't really care about your budget. Your budget is like a restraint of what you have to spend. So they're interested in actual numbers and the actual, what that balance is rolling
In the
to.
system.
In the system. So they never looked at the spreadsheets. That's not what they get paid to do. They're engaged to actually look at the numbers that were actually put in the system.
So we'll have to take care of this internally each year to make sure that we haven't got off.
We've already have a process now, how that's taken care of. The reports that I deliver to you via financial report are strictly from Munis that I pull out off of the database. And when we go through the budget this year, you will have it pulled out of the database. So we've got a process in place right now where that won't happen, and I train staff how to verify your fund balances.
So I'm sorry, so I guess I'm still not quite satisfied. What's my checks and balances? I mean, I hear you saying we're gonna do it,
Mhm.
but 5 years from now, what's my checks and balances? Am I have to bring someone else in again to
No.
look?
I love seeing these guys,
Checks and
but,
balances?
but no, the key is that,
So listen, about 4 years ago, we switched from Banner to Munis. And we had a year there where we were paying on, using Banner in one aspect of the ledger, I think it was, and the budgeting aspect was Munis, so we were in transition. And at that point, prior to Munis, everything was centralized to the finance department. So everything got paid on paper and went to the finance department. When the city manager spoke of Excel sheets and those in our separate departments, we tried to stay organized and you know, we've got this paper flying and everything else, and we're trying to work off of this. I think in there lies a good deal potentially of this. Now that Munis has come along and we've gotten down the road and we've identified this, finance has more of a role to kind of oversee what the departments are doing, and it's all there in Munis. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that may give a little bit more of an explanation, maybe.
But you also have one other item, and that's the thing that when we first looked at it, in that comprehensive annual financial report, it has a fund balance at the back. And so part of it is, and a challenge that I have for my team and that we do, is education. We've got to not just present the document, we got to show people how to read it and what it says. It has always been right in our audit. It's just the monthly reports, the numbers weren't consistent.
Well, I'm concerned about Mr. Cooks's comment. I'm not sure I got an answer to Mr. Cooks's question yet. In that, Ms. Atmore says, no, we don't have to look at this again. And I'm like, well, why not? Because I think Mr. Cooks is saying, how come we don't look at this like every year to make sure things are right? You said we don't have to, and I'm like, really? Maybe it ought to
because
be
you
a
should
good
have
thing to look at.
internal staff trained to look at your fund balance every year, and that's what we do.
Maybe he's looking for a policy that won't allow us to create a sub-ledger system. Because when you have two sets of books, you have two sets of numbers.
Well,
Right.
yeah, I intentionally
So that-
avoided using the word two sets of books, but you just said it.
So I'm just out
I
there.
was thinking it, but I didn't say it. But, you know, I think that Mr. Cooks is making a valid point here that at least
Policy.
annually for an internal control accounting process policy, there ought to be some look at that, however
So-
that's constructed.
Part of what's coming through you through this year, through the budget process, we can look at our fiscal policies.
Yes.
And I will put a fund balance policy in your financial policy, so make sure that that happens every year. But that is supposed to be standardized across the field, where you look at your fund balance every year, not every 3 years, but every year.
And that's fine, so I'm thinking you, but I'm also thinking down the line from you.
Put it in policy so for others to follow.
Yeah.
Yes,
We just need a warm fuzzy every year.
yeah. Well, that's how I'm training the staff now, is that that's important to them.
Thank you, sorry for taking so long, but just had to get the clarification.
Any-
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you, appreciate your work. We got we got about 10 minutes. Can you make it, or we need more time?
I can make it.
Okay.
It's just, what do you-
Interim Chief Slavigny, receive and follow up presentation concerning City of Duncanville's current loud and raucous noise ordinance, ordinance 1794, section 1, relating to citizen quality of life, providing City Council recommended provisions for adoption.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. As you know, we're discussing our noise ordinance because it is a quality of life issue. We recognize that. And but just kind of recapping real quickly, in October of this year, I briefed the council and did some comparisons of our best Southwest cities. In November, we were asked to take a look at some other cities, and we did that. We brought back some other facets of ordinances we found. Some of the council members asked us to potentially consider including some exceptions, prohibitions, and other things. So this is where we are tonight. As proposed, the prohibitions or prima facie, basically if you do this at this time, it's prima facie that you're in violation. So it really just kind of tightened the time that we proposed. You know, in the summertime, dusk is about 8:30, you get to 9 o'clock, maybe in the springtime, kids are trying to get to bed, what have you. We propose that. It keeps the needed officers, or the officer's ability to mitigate a resolution. Because what may be offensive to some may not be offensive to others, even in the same setting. Some of the exceptions that were asked for: motor vehicles, utility repairs, emergency sirens, whistles, that happens, repairs, excavations, so emergency repairs, if we've got utility work that needs to happen, and it has to happen right now, regardless if it's, in the evening, 2 o'clock in the morning, we got to get that done. Outdoor school and playground activities and other events as permitted. As a section for repeat violators, we propose a 24-month running period, but the key is convictions, okay? And then that goes to the judge, to where they would have the ability to assess the maximum fine. And they should assess the maximum fine. Adds explicit enforcement section, basically says who has primary enforcement action. It is the police department. Nothing in the ordinance, again, shall prevent the police department or its officers from trying to mitigate the situation. Noise is a big thing. It can be a health issue. We realize on one end, it's a quality of life issue. On another end, if you're trying to promote business and economic development, there's a fine line somewhere in there that we've got to figure out where that is. And that's what we're trying to do. The final comments: education is key. It always is, regardless of what we're dealing with. Internally, our personnel, we've got to have our personnel document and obtain statements and readings. And that's our issue. And we've got to educate our folks about it and expect that they're going to do that as best they can. Externally, citizens must know that we do believe their noise complaints are important, but we do have limitations, and we have to prioritize our calls. But we need them to be complaining witnesses. We can't be offended if we get out there and they want to make an anonymous call. We can go evaluate it. If we've got another neighbor that says, yeah, I didn't like that, and they want to give us a statement, we can go from there. But we need our citizens' help as well. 3 minutes, Mayor.
Very well. Couple questions. I did see in the package, you noted here on the slide, that you're going from 10 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it's just my personal opinion, I think that's a little restrictive on our citizens. I'd kind of like to see it stay at 10 p.m. because, particularly in the summertime and so forth. I don't think we need to make it seasonal, but I think keeping it at 10 p.m. is a more reasonable time than 9 p.m. It's more constraining on activities. I don't know what y'all think on that one. I'd rather just keep it 10 versus making it 9, but I don't know.
No, I think that there's plenty of folks out there that are ready to go to bed at 9 o'clock. And if you're talking about residential neighborhoods and still having loud music to whatever level, I don't know, you gotta respect those folks that are packing it in by 9 o'clock. And I thought that was a good idea when I saw it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I probably would agree with the 10, only based upon the community we're living in, and we have a good seasoned community, but we also have a good up and coming community with the younger generation as well. So a combination of both, I think that 10 would be satisfactory to a little bit, kind of accommodating both.
Okay.
I like 10.
Yeah, Joe.
I like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the summer, there's got a lot of families getting together, swimming pools and whatnot. It is a little loud, but around 10 it starts to taper down. I think most folks are aware of that.
Another question I had was, I'm sorry, go, Mr.
Oh, no,
Chair.
you had a question already.
You're talking about complaints and then it becomes a court action. I didn't see anything that says after X number of complaints, this becomes a court action.
Well, no.
Or do we just keep giving them warnings and going to them? And,
No.
when do you become a repeat offender that we're actually going to take you to court?
So understand that you don't have to, we could go out and if you stood there and said, no, I'm tired of this, I want this to happen, I'm willing to give a statement, and, it's unreasonable to me.
Then it happens.
And it happens,
Okay.
we can take that. Now, again, it's an education on our folks because we're trying to get to that next call. We're trying to handle it. But if somebody tells us, what I've just outlined, we can get into the court at that point. When you go before a judge. Now, if you have, what we're proposing, if you have 2 convictions over a 24-month rolling period, then on that third conviction, the judge, we would ask in this ordinance, the judge to impose the maximum fine.
So there's no threshold on the number of complaints before it
No.
becomes a court action? It's simply how the
We just have to
citizen
have a
desires to push it forward?
complaining witness.
Okay. Mr. Coons?
So, I know we're almost out of time. So, on the report, and I guess since the beginning of this, I've been trying to figure out where this discussion came from, why it was put on the agenda in the first place. And there was something here, because when I first saw it, it just said that the police was asking council for direction on revising and revamping the noise ordinance. And that's all I saw, and so I thought, okay, let's present some ways that we can improve the ordinance for the citizens. And so that's where those the proposals came from. And now I'm looking at this report. It says, in September 2021, a council member asked about our noise ordinance to consider a special use permit agenda item presented by the city planner. And so this is
So
something different.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'll address that because if I've got the timing right, is that when we were looking at a piece of property on Center Street that neighbored to Lakeside Park, there was questions being raised about noise then, so that's when
The genesis of it really, Mr. Coons, comes from citizen complaints.
Okay, yeah.
If citizens hadn't come to us, I had a couple personal myself. I think maybe all of us at some point are getting phone calls or emails, but it was generated more by citizen complaints to relook at this rather than somebody on council.
It may have been a merging of those issues.
Yeah,
There was an
that's
SUP
fine.
that was considered by the council in September that Sky presented. And then I think, obviously, there's some complaints.
Mr. Contreras.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Coons.
yeah, well, because I remember in the last meeting, we were concerned, there was some opposition to changing the ordinance because we were concerned about overburdening the police department. But like the mayor just said, this discussion is in response to citizen complaints. And I think what a lot of citizens are wondering, and yeah, I get a lot of those, and I know everybody here at this table gets concerns. A lot of citizens are wondering, if I'm sitting at home and somebody goes blasting down the street with the loud pipes, does our ordinance give the police department any power to do anything about it? Is there any way that I can objectively voice a complaint or if I'm sitting in my house and somebody starts a generator at 2 in the morning? And so, and there are lots of, there's a variety of these kinds of questions I know y'all have to deal with. My question is, can we take this to a more public discussion, potentially with a town hall or something like that? Because I feel like there's a lot more discussion that needs to take place here with citizens.
We are in discussion mode.
But what I'm talking about,
In terms of, if he's asking what more do we want to do? So really, what you're saying, Mr. Coons, is valid, because we are open to more complaint. In fact, I saw Mr. Contreras, I saw your hand. One thing that happened today, I received a noise complaint from a citizen, and it was forwarded on, because I'm looking at it and go like, it's on tonight's agenda. And the interesting thing was, it was coincidence. I wouldn't say coincidence. It was convergence between an event and it being on tonight's agenda that the citizen contacted me. And superbly, our police department looked at it and said, let's just go talk to the citizen. And Lieutenant Wilcox went and talked to the citizen, had a conversation with the citizen. And here's a very interesting comment. The citizen told Lieutenant Wilcox, I've never called 911 because I didn't think the city knew anything about it, that there was an ordinance about it in the first place. So there was that education piece that Chief was talking about that we are going to undertake to let citizens know, if you have a problem, let us know. And don't be hesitant about calling 911. So if you call 911, we can dispatch based on our priorities and what else is going on in the city, and we can do something about it. So that was a very interesting.
Is it
piece of
911 or is
information.
it the other, by the way?
You know, if you think you've got an
See, this-
emergency, we're not gonna parse
There it
parse
is.
that out.
There it is. People think, well, this isn't important enough to call 911, so they call the non-emergency number.
Okay.
But my press on this thing is call 911 and let the dispatcher use that information and decide on how to get that to our people. And then our people can decide how to use our resources, our law enforcement, on how to get out to that particular complaint.
They will classify it, we call 911, they will classify it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, ma'am, they'll
Yeah.
prioritize it.
But Mr. Contreras and then Mr. McNamara, Mr. Contreras.
You knew this was coming. The decibels. I see where you kind of shifted gears, and instead of proposing it in your ordinance, you referred back to the Texas Penal Code and this 85 decibel. So tell me what the practicality or the reality is of actually using that penal code when you can't come to a decision with the complainant and the violator. Are you going to use that tool to say, here I'm measuring it, it's over 85? And 85, by the way, it's somewhere around the range of a lawnmower or garbage disposal. And if so, what distance away from that noise, where the noise is being produced? Have you thought all that out about how that's going to play
It's gotta
into?
be from the boundary of the offended person. That's where we have to take that measurement. Now, we did look at potentially placing some sort of decibel reading in the ordinance, potentially. But when we considered it, went back to the CDC chart. Do you know that a general conversation is at 60 decibels? 85 is the threshold, and that's what's in the penal code, the disorderly conduct. So if we start to compress that, we start to really become arbitrary on what we're starting to talk about. And, you know, that's a tough place to be. I've talked to Mr. Hager about that, and, you know, we've had that conversation. And, you know, that's too close. That's too close. So, did I answer your question, or did you have several of them bundled up in there?
No, it's just that I want to be sure that we're using that at the right place. So if you have the generator situation, which I hear got resolved, and let's say I live 30 feet away from that generator. This says that if the noise exceeds 85 decibels, and the way it reads to me is at the point of the violation, at the point of where the noise is being produced.
We can shore that up there and put it where the boundary of the offended person.
Okay, well, I think that's more apropos when, and as I said to you at the last meeting, you gave me information that changed my mind about something, and that was that the majority of the cases where officers go out and meet with both parties, there's a resolution that occurs as a result of the police working with both parties. So I really like that. So I know this is a rarity where this may come up, but I want to make sure it's not so rare we never can use it.
Sure, and I don't mean to minimize that and make it sound like that we all come to kumbaya, because I know that's not a reality. And I know that at some point, we have to get to the next level. And in this case, that would be getting into a courtroom, municipal court. Mr. Coons, you mentioned something earlier, the other part of the education. You described the car going down the road. Now, even if that were a violation, whether it was a decibel reader or it was unreasonable, we still have to get there and figure out if that was the car that was going down the road that's considered. I mean, so it's just not, we've got to make these connections too, and that's sometimes where it becomes difficult. And that's part of the education as well. I just want to be very clear about that.
Yeah, and I understand all that. I guess, I think the last time this ordinance was updated was 2002. There's a lot more people in Duncanville now since then. And just taking this opportunity to, again, I personally, to speak for myself, feel like I would like to hear from more citizens about their concerns, and then taking that and working, that into this conversation about updating the ordinance.
Well, and the other thing that we potentially could do before we do that, is we could we can have an assessment done. A third-party assessment of what the what are the decibel readings around the city over a 30 or 60-day period. Mr. Hager and I spoke about that. Mr. Hager, do you have something that you wanted to?
Yeah. The problem with this is it's a subjective standard that a citizen has, and you're trying to put an objective decibel level on it. I bet you the ambient air noise in Duncanville is a lot higher than you think it is, and it's probably closer to 85 than you think it is. Because the ambient air noise is the highway, cars going up down the road. That's standard noise. So you have to take those readings at 10 o'clock, between 7 o'clock, and that'll be your offensive time. Because we have to have a reasonable standard, so we have to have the study done to set it below 85. The difference is if you do 85, that's disorderly conduct. That still doesn't mean it may not be offensive at 2 o'clock in the morning if it's less than 85, which is to your point.
Which would be a violation of the time rather than the decibel.
Yes. So it's real, this is a very difficult thing to quantify, and it's even harder to enforce, because a lot of times the source of the noise is gone by the time a police officer gets there or someone complains about it. It's like the barking dog cases. I've tried barking dog cases for 40 years. They were the same in 1979 as they are in 2021. It's somebody's offended, somebody's dog's barking, and then it's my dog's in the house and I got a ticket for my barking dog that they swore was mine, it was my neighbor's.
Mr. McBurnett.
You know, it's just really difficult.
Real quick. What percent, how many calls do you think we get for noise?
I think I think the period was a year that we looked, about 900, but some of that had other disturbances in there, and it was difficult for us to parse out given the system we had.
And then, so those were we have two parties, I guess, that doesn't have other factors in. What percentage do you think was mitigated by the police officers that just basically?
Very large percentage. Some of those are reported anonymously, so there is no mitigation. So, but I think a majority.
Right. And so, I mean, and Jeremy, respectfully, I mean, we're here to represent our people, and so we are having that discussion, and that's where I think that we're having that representation versus having a town hall regarding noise.
Well,
and there's basically we have pretty much a resolution that's effective.
I mean, as difficult as it, I understand it's difficult, but this is a major complaint. I know it's a big issue, so I appreciate y'all taking the time to add the.
It's not a major.
But it doesn't matter.
It's not a major complaint, and it's not a big issue.
Okay. So anyway, so I appreciate y'all taking the time to make the revisions and to put some of the changes in there. I hope that we can continue this conversation because it's a concern that people have, and I don't want our constituents, or at least my constituents, thinking that we're just dismissing this because it's difficult.
And as I said earlier,
This discussion I think it's just difficult to define. It's like pornography. I know when I see it, try to define it, it's a whole different kettle of fish. And it doesn't matter what the source of the noise is. Noise is noise to the citizen's point. So that's the way your ordinance is. Loud and raucous noises. Here's some examples. Stereos, lawnmower.
Trying to quantify trying to objectively quantify an annoyance
It's like
is beyond any of our ability to
another
do.
difficult thing is light. Light and glare standards are difficult too.
Okay, we are over time, folks. It's 7:08. We need to move to City Council chambers quickly. Thank you. It is always an honor and a pleasure and a privilege for me to recognize individuals in our city that are considered champions of our city. And for tonight, the individual that we would like to recognize is Madeline Kelly Schwach. Madeline, if you come up, please. Reggie, good to see you tonight with her. Y'all come right over here. Well, I'm acquainted with Madeline for her activities and finding out when we went into the 2020 census and doing those activities as well, found out that she actually participated in the 2010 census for our city. And so that her involvement is very, very long-term and sustainable. And thinking about individuals that I would like to recognize as our champion for the city, Madeline came to mind. And I spoke with her, and you know, sometimes you got to twist people's arms and say, hey, come up, I want to recognize you. I want to give you a pat on the back. But Madeline's here with her husband, Reggie. Great people. So Madeline, I want to read this recognition that I've written for you. Ms. Madeline Kelly Schwach is recognized as a champion of the city for her tireless work as leader and chair of the 2020 Census Complete Count Committee, also known as the CCC, for the Duncanville area and for her many volunteer interests. As a direct result of her leading the CCC, our 2020 census self-response rate was 73.2%. 15% greater than Dallas County and 17% greater than the entire state of Texas. The recent use of the census data directly contributed to the City Council's understanding of redistricting formulae. Ms. Kelly Schwach She also served and included
Thank you. Without a bunch of people stepping up and volunteering, one standing next to me with all of his knee surgeries, one committee, huh? And Amelia, I'm sorry. My glasses don't fit when I'm holding the paper and the microphone. So, anyway, and I thank the city, particularly the council members, for saying that we would do the complete count committee. I think we had a little hiccup at the beginning, but then we decided to do it. And thanks to everybody who tried to help and get that done. So thank the city for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Reggie, thank you for being a great help for Madeline. Don't go away, we'll need some pictures.
Oh, you need pictures?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Oh,
Hey, I have another place on my desk.
yeah, hold on a sec.
Thank you. Where do we go?
The two of you. Oh, okay.
So we have to hold this?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay.
Can't put it on Facebook.
You can't put it on Facebook. Hold this, please. Glasses and mask. Okay, so you get this and get it. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Swing this back up. The next item on our agenda is citizens' input. Pursuant to Section 551.007 of the Texas Government Code, any member of the public has the opportunity to address City Council concerning any matter of public business or any posted agenda item. However, the Act prohibits City Council from deliberating any issues not on the public agenda, and such non-agenda issues may be referred to city staff for research and any future action. All persons addressing council are subject to council-adopted rules and limitations as permitted by law. At this time, we will take 2-minute comments from anyone present who wishes to speak, and we also have some inputs that have been sent to the city secretary by email, which I will read. And we also have, one individual who wishes to speak via remote, by Zoom. Okay, so probably the best thing to do, let's get the technical issue aside if we can, and speak with that individual who wants to speak via Zoom, please.
IT, can you please turn on Ms. Shroom's microphone? Are you there, Ms. Shroom? IT, is it turned on? Mayor, she's not on anymore. Can you please read her comment?
Okay, I will read her comments. This is from Peg Shroom, 612 Carriage Way in the city of Duncanville. And I will read verbatim her inputs to us. Council, I would like to speak against the ordinance you will be voting on tonight that institutes permits, fees, and regulations on short-term rentals in the city of Duncanville. I ask you to vote against this ordinance. You have just finished pledging allegiance to the flag and the republic for which it stands, and that pledge is the line with liberty and justice for all. This ordinance impinges on your citizens' liberties, it impinges on my liberties, and is anything but justice for all. If you are truly representative of the citizens who elected you, you will vote no on this ordinance. You might ask, how does it impinge on citizens' liberties? It impinges on my liberties by not allowing me to do what I want with my own home unless I admit a government official into my home and allow them to inspect and approve my home. Do you want the government to control what goes on in your home? Question mark. I do not. You may ask, how is this ordinance not just for all? Question mark. The provisions of this ordinance require each home to be up to current building code. That would mean only the rich who can afford new homes would be eligible for permits. Anyone with an older home would not be approved for a permit without spending thousands of dollars to upgrade all of their systems to current building codes. These are hard times. A lot of people need extra income and don't have thousands of dollars sitting around. This ordinance will take an extra means of income away from the middle and lower economic classes. It will also take away the low-end options for the renters looking to come to town. That's not justice for all. That's government overreach. I ask the council to remember that you are our representatives. You are elected to preserve our liberty and give us justice. Please vote against this ordinance. We don't want the government telling us what we can do with our own homes. End. Thank you. The next item I have to be read is from Eloise Square, 627 Alameda Avenue. The noise in my neighborhood in District 1 comes from the cars racing up and down Santa Fe between Wheatland and Danieldale. Sometimes it sounds like the cars are in your backyard. There must be something you can do to keep the traffic moving at the posted speed limit. 1. From the south, make Santa Fe one lane, especially at the curve in the street. We cannot see oncoming traffic when exiting our neighborhood on Alameda Avenue. 2. Place signs at Alameda and Santa Fe, parens. Stop signs on Clark Road control the traffic, semicolon, also on Joel Wilson, close parens. Thank you for reading my email. The next item is from Patricia Ebert, 115 South Greenstone Lane. I will preface reading this. There is a portion of this which I am not going to read because it contains information that we have a prohibition against reading publicly, but this item will be put into our agenda in full public disclosure. This is what I will read. Please have the mayor or his designate read my public comments. Agenda 2B, review of the city's fund balance for the utility operating fund. Agenda 2B is most troublesome to me because GFOA awarded annually for years and years. Sub-bullet, GFOA award on page 8 of 282 of 2021-2022 budget. Bullet, clean annual financial audits for years and years. Sub-bullet, City Council has articulated their pride in the financial audits and awards for years and years.
Read the name and address.
Yes, I did.
Oh, we did.
Okay. Or just to make sure, I believe I did read Patricia your address, right? Yes, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. Those are all the written inputs. We'll now go to individuals present who wish to speak or just make notice. The first individual I have the card for is T. Williams. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please. And our time limit on citizen comments is 2 minutes, and the timer's in front of you.
Good evening, council members and city leaders. I really appreciate being able to speak with you. This is about the noise ordinance. We had the opportunity to listen to you all deliberate over some of the issues. What I can share with you is how loud is 85 decibels. Some information that I have provided that you each should have is a conversation is 60 decibels. Dishwasher is 75 decibels. After that, you're at a risk of losing hearing.
Ms. Williams, you're permitted to take your mask off to speak if you wish.
Thank you.
There you go.
85 decibels is heavy city traffic, school cafeteria, or vacuum cleaning. 95 decibels is a motorcycle. I've directly contacted the city council, mayor, city council members, the former chief of police, the city manager approximately 33 times via phone, non-emergency number, email, face-to-face, or via text message from May 2020 to December 2021 regarding noise, especially noise being a public health issue. We have a lot of noise pollution that's causing tinnitus and exacerbating other health issues, along with economic development. The issues that we're having is loud booming noise coming from cars, screeching tires, spinning out, speeding, rolling on stop signs, especially in our neighborhood. Due to health concerns that have been exacerbated, I pretty much lost hope with the city and had just stopped participating. What I can tell you is that my recommendations are on page 4, and there are 4 of them. Regarding the noise ordinance, that the body amend the decibel limit, that they make a disorderly conduct with fines up to $2,000, that they actually be enforced and that the public be made aware of it, and that it is asked and inquired of the proposed to be reviewed by the city attorney of the city's liability should this not be enforced, resulting in negativity.
Thank you.
These are the pictures that you also have as well.
The next comment card I have is from Marianne Romano. And please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
My name is Mary Ann Romano, and I reside at 639 Sherrill Boulevard. I've lived in Duncanville for 25 years now, and I've seen steady increase in noise. I can now hear the highway, which I couldn't before, but those are background noises to me now. I don't even notice them half the time. What I'm concerned about is the disruptive, reckless, and habitual people who are allowing noise to wake people up or prevent them from sleeping at night. I'm old enough to know that young people have parties, and in July, I expect a party. I don't worry about it. I put on earplugs and put on music in the house, and I'm fine. I'm talking about the people who are continually allowing their dogs to bark all night long, racing cars up and down the streets. It's really obvious to me that the people who are racing have a police scanner, because the noise immediately stops after I make a call. 2 minutes after I've made a call, everything stops, and I know it's because they have a scanner. We have to have some way to address this, and I'm a little concerned that you don't have the appropriate elements or are not going to put the appropriate elements into your ordinance. You have to define it as disruptive, as habitual, and as disorderly, and call it what it is, disorderly conduct, and apply some kind of consequences. I don't know what you're talking about to get to a conviction, but I would think that after one warning, you should be starting to tally up, getting these people to court if they're continuing to ignore it. You have to have some means of enforcing it, and you have to have some means of saying to the population, here's what we're going to do if you don't do it. Education. I think all of those elements have to be a part of that ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is Mark Graham. Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Mark Graham, 410 Santa Fe Trail. And surprise, I'll talk about the Ladland. In the last month, I've had a couple of experts. I've taken a tour of the land with them. First, Tom Willard, who is on the board of Audubon Dallas. He's the habitat manager at Cedar Ridge Preserve. He helped establish the restoration of the Blackland Prairie at the preserve and is active with Texas Master Naturalists. He knows his stuff. He was thrilled when he saw the land. He's never been on it before. He looked at it and said, you've got a gem, you're wasting it if you start developing on it. I took him a little ways down to where you could see where a concrete wall is built on 10 Mile Creek where we did develop, and you say the creek won't change, that's what we'll have. It's concrete walls. From all the way from Daniel Dale all the way down to Harrington Park or Main Street, you have concrete walls shoring up the bank. And he agreed that if trees are removed, it's going to erode more. His take on it was it should be a preserve. Now, what you do with it from there is open, but he was convinced it's well worth saving. The second guy was a treat. And I'm not sure I can pronounce his name right. Sam Kiesnick. He is an urban wildlife biologist with Texas Parks and Wildlife. He's based out of Cedar Hill State Park. He got his master's from Tarleton State. He's a former nature educator for the city of Mansfield, a naturalist at the Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge, and a science interpreter with Fort Worth Museum of Science. Wow. All right, he was great. He said it's Austin. That's what he said. You have a piece of Austin right here, and you will ruin it. That's basically what he said.
Thank you, sir. Next card I have is Erica Browning.
Erica Browning, 442 East Cherry Street. I want to say thank you to the council for taking up the issue of the noise ordinance. I will say that it is a major issue. It's not just a minor inconvenience. The kinds and levels of noise that we put up with on a daily basis is beyond annoying. It angers me, and I know that we're not alone. We have a dog 2 doors down that barks constantly, and visitors to that same house honk their horn long and loud multiple times every day. And yes, I have called the police, I have talked to the city, and this has been going on for at least 3 years since those people have lived there. But the absolute worst is the loud engines of vehicles on our neighborhood streets. We have installed the best windows we could at great expense, and we still literally have to halt a conversation mid-sentence multiple times while a car with these stupid loud noises go by. The vehicles are peeling out or revving their engine as they charge down our street, and we live in a neighborhood. We don't live on, Wheatland or Santa Fe Trail. We live in a neighborhood, but it happens to be in a neighborhood that's not quite as quiet as some of y'all's. That doesn't make it any less important. I would challenge each and every one of you to do an assessment in front of my house. Do an assessment somewhere in District 3 or on East Cherry Street or up on Johnson. Do an assessment and see what it sounds like to you, because it's really annoying. I've lived here for 8 years. I have never wanted to leave Duncanville. I want to leave because I can't stand the noise. That's not a way a citizen should have to enjoy this town and their home. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card I have, I believe it's Jim Jones. The last name is Jones. I'm not.
All my life.
Sorry?
All my life.
Oh, okay. It is Jim?
Yes.
Okay, yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr.
Evening.
Mayor, Council. My name is Jim Jones, 1627 Nob Hill Circle, and I'm here to talk about the Ladd property. And so when you come into the city hall, you hear "Keep America Beautiful," and you hear "Keep Duncanville Beautiful," and you see Tree City. And so Duncanville's been developed for a long, long time. And so we have our park system, but our park system is not connected the way that it might be in Mansfield or in Grapevine. So we have an older park system. So those park systems are connected by trails on creeks, but ours can't. So that leads us to the Ladd property. And as y'all consider the Ladd property, what Mark mentioned is pretty important. It truly is a gem. I don't know if you have gone down to take a look at it, but it is a spring-fed creek. I've been here 31 years in Greenbrier. It has never, ever run dry. And so you have an ancient rock-bottom creek. It has otters. They were endangered 50, 60 years ago. There's beavers. So what that does is that leads me to bring you to the preservation adequacy. So I want you to know that there is an astonishingly large group of volunteers working on this to try to convince you that a preserve is the right thing to do. So we're knocking on doors. And I will tell you that we have hundreds of signatures so far. And what I will tell you, and it's not statistically proven up, but I will tell you that 95% of the people, when they open the door, if they open the door, sign the petition. And so you heard of NIMBY, not in my backyard. What they do not want is concrete. They do not want development, warehousing, business development, or housing. They want a nature preserve. So we have the foundation for something that is really a big thing for this city. You'll have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, sir. And the final card I have is from Amelia Moore, and I understand somebody is going to read for her. Understand, thank you. Hope you recover well.
My name is Amelia Moore. I live at 435 Round Top.
Residential area noise levels are abnormal and disruptive when they hinder conversation, sleep, and other usual activities and have a general negative impact on quality of life, explains the EPA. Research confirms that high noise levels cause problems such as high blood pressure, stress, loss of productivity, and hearing loss. Although the EPA does not directly regulate noise issues, its noise level guidelines provide a basis of local and state government set standards, which for the EPA says that 55 decibels is appropriate. She has to use, her and her husband, I want to say, use this inside of their home in order to be able to watch television because the noise is outside.
From the music next door.
From the music next door, the music coming from the cars, along with the booming. Is that it, Ms. Amelia? Okay.
Thank you. City Attorney, is it acceptable for me to just make a comment? No, didn't think so. Just want to make sure. Anyway, One thing that I can say, I believe, in response to our citizen inputs, is that your participation and your involvement and your willingness to inform us of your personal opinions is valuable. The amount of individuals who have come forward several times in the past several meetings in communication. Communication is valuable, whether it's positive or negative in its content is of no matter. The fact that people are willing to express themselves to us as a council and to staff is what's important. And I, as mayor, and I think on behalf of all of the council, we appreciate your involvement and your willingness to come forward and talk to us. Thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. City Secretary, if you please read the consent agenda.
Item 4A, consider the minutes for August 14th Town Hall meeting, August 17th City Council regular meeting, August 24th City Council special meeting, September 7th City Council regular meeting, September 24th City Council regular meeting, October 14th City Council special meeting, November 8th City Council special meeting, November 11th, 12th, and 13th City Council special meeting, November 16th City Council regular meeting, November 30th City Council special meeting. 4B, consider a resolution authorizing a cooperative purchasing agreement with Vortex Companies, Vortex LLC, using the interlocal purchasing system TIPS contract 20110401 wastewater improvements, pipe bursting wastewater mains on Briarmead Drive, East Fair Meadows Drive, Fair Meadows Circle, and various streets in the Forest Hill Addition for the Public Works Department with an estimated expenditure amount of $999,996.25 and an appropriation of $99,999.63 for a contingency equaling 10% of the original contract price. 4C, consider a resolution authorizing the third option to renew for an additional one-year period beginning November 27, 2021 and ending November 26, 2022 for IFB-19-001 traffic signal maintenance services with Siemens Mobility, Inc. with an estimated amount up to $156,610. 4D, consider a resolution authorizing the purchase of traffic operations equipment, maintenance, and supplies from Consolidated Traffic Control, Inc. using the Houston Galveston Area Council of Governments Cooperative Contract Number PE-05-21 and the amount up to $85,376. 4E, consider a resolution authorizing the purchase of traffic operations equipment and supplies from Paradigm Traffic Systems using Byboard Cooperative Purchasing Agreement Number 603-20 and the amount up to $91,800.
Thank you, City Secretary. Mr. McBurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like a motion to approve with the corrected changes that Mr. Coons had mentioned as well.
Thank you for those corrected changes that were mentioned in our briefing session was the misspelling of Mr. Kuntz's name. Those changes will be made. There is a motion to approve the consent agenda items. There a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cooks. Council, please vote. Thank you. Approved unanimously. Moving on to item 5, items for individual consideration. Consider an ordinance amending Chapter 5, parens, Buildings and General Building Regulations, close parens, by adding Article 8, parens, Short-Term Rental Registration Regulations, close parens. Mr. Thibodeau, City Planner. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll leave this slide up as I read a portion of my staff report in order to address the question that was, or the comments that were made during the citizens input section of tonight's meeting. So, in reaction to the City of Austin's strict regulations for short-term rentals in 2016 toward the banning of short-term rentals by the year 2022, Senate Bill number 451 was approved in September of 2017, preventing cities from banning short-term rentals, but still allowing cities to impose health, safety, traffic, and nuisance rules. The bill intended to allow property owners to protect rental investment despite a few irresponsible homeowners who fail to manage their properties and continue to provide opportunities to generate tax revenues to local and state economies. An item added to the zoning ordinance update back in March 2021 when the new zoning ordinance was adopted, which was in response to the Senate Bill 451 regarding this item, was the establishment of the use of short-term rentals. So that is an established use in the zoning ordinance. In certain districts, you have to get approval via an SUP, a specific use permit. In certain sections of the downtown Duncanville district, actually the entire district, they are permitted by right. The use is permitted by right as noted in certain sections, that being the downtown Duncanville section, and by approval of a specific use permit in other residential zones. Once adopted, Ordinance 2419, this ordinance will be the regulating document related to the permitting, registering, and performance regulations associated with the short-term rentals who apply to operate within the city of Duncanville. Earlier today, I did receive your email, Mayor, so I went ahead and put a response to those questions. I'll read them as they were provided. So question number 1, page 8, section 12C-57, while the registration may be complained about by residents, does this mean a public hearing will ensue and a SUP will still be applied for and the registration becomes a council matter? Not necessarily. So our planning technician, Ms. Lynette, is already reaching out to properties that we are aware that are operating as short-term rentals to come in and get the SUP. So prior to any kind of registration, that unless it's a property within the downtown district zoning, it will have to get an SUP approval. So that will be prior to the registration process, the function of this ordinance.
So the key operative was what you mentioned earlier, it's permitted by right.
That's if you receive a approval of SUP where available, or within the downtown Duncanville zoning district, if you apply within that district.
So hypothetically, I prefer to use my house.
Yes.
Then I would come to the city to register.
In that case, yeah, we would check and see what your address is. Obviously, we really haven't received any SUP approvals.
Right. Aside from those technicalities, then the next step is that I
Zoning
still need to
approval.
apply for an SUP.
Yes, sir.
And that SUP is going to go before planning and zoning, and that SUP is going to come before council.
Just like any other SUP process, yes,
Okay,
sir.
and that was the essence of my question, because as I read this, it was like the process kind of stopped with registration, but
Right.
knowing how things work,
Right.
I pretty well thought that there's still going to be some next steps that have to be governed.
Right,
by
and
the
some
council.
cities don't have the SUP step. We happen to have that step, so you have to get through that in order to register for the program.
Got it, okay, thank you.
The second question, page 8, section 12C-58, is the council to decide on a fee with the possible approval of this ordinance during tonight's meeting, or will the setting of a fee be a separate matter at a later date? I would have no clue about how such a fee would be set, and question about other cities. So the ordinance is set up to have this adopted by resolution following this meeting. Staff would recommend that we follow the fees applied for residential rental properties, the longer-term ones, which are a registration inspection and a CO are involved in a fee of $75. The registration itself, your annual fee is $25. If there's a change of ownership, that's $10. And a rental certificate of occupancy replacement fee would be $10, and a late fee of $50. And that's applied if any registration renewal or owner change is over 30 days after the due date, or if an inspection date is not scheduled within 30 days of registration or last failed inspection. So I would recommend we just follow that. And just like the residential program, if we feel at some point in the future we need to raise those fees a little bit, we can do that. And that would be a resolution of the master fee schedule.
So then should this be amended to include what you just said? Because it says council is going to approve a fee at a later date.
Mhm.
Should this, can we amend this to include that?
Right.
Sometimes we bring both the same night, but in this case, we wanted to see if we wanted to pass this, the next council meeting, we'll bring the fee resolution for the council to set the fees for this.
That's right.
Okay, that'll be next step. We wouldn't, okay, got it, okay.
So-
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Does that mean that we can't talk about the fees now, city manager?
Why don't you wait till the fee item is brought
'Cause
before you for the resolution? That would be the appropriate spot. What he's telling you, those are the fees that we're going to recommend, those are the fees we'll bring to you. The night that it's before you, you can change them to whatever you want.
And I understand that. However, before that happens, I think we also should be able to give him some input before we bring those fees back versus going back and forth. So since it's been brought up as a part of a conversation, I think it also should be included in our deliberation.
That recommendation goes to city manager, correct?
Well, deliberation, I'm not giving any instructions, I'm in deliberation for us to talk about, since we're bringing it up.
I didn't bring it up.
No, since it's been brought up on the agenda.
I
sir.
brought it up reading through the document because there was this kind of blank that left it, fees are going to be decided by city council at a later date. That's why I wanted to have this discussion tonight, because to me, it was open-ended in what we have before us, and I wanted to try and get closure on that.
And it should have been clarified a little bit better. Apologies on my end. So every February, it's kind of customary in the city to update the master fee schedule. That was done February of last year with a number of items that were added. So this year, we are planning to have some items that are under consideration for our Public Works Department, some other things that will be all presented together, and we'll present the master fee schedule as one, and this will be one of the items that we'll discuss.
Well, the question to me is whether or not it's appropriate to discuss it. It's within the bounds of the ordinance, it's appropriate to discuss it.
Thank you very much. Then I'll continue, and that means that I would, based upon what I'm hearing from you tonight, City Manager, I don't think those fees are appropriate. I think those fees should be higher. And I'd like to see about having two, when you're presenting this for us for approval, to really consider looking at 3 fee schedules for a recommendation versus just one. But I do believe what we're just hearing tonight is that's a very low amount. I think that amount should be much higher.
Okay, thank you. I know I interrupted you, well, you caused me to interrupt you by reading my questions. So I don't know where you're at in your presentation. I know Mr. Contreras has a comment as well, so would you like to make that now or let Mr. Thibodeau finish?
I'll let him finish.
Okay.
And that was pretty much it. The third one was question of enforcement and surveillance may be addressed tonight by the group.
All right, Mr. Contreras. Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a few questions. First, was this ordinance something that you got from another city, or was there a framework that you worked off of to develop this?
Yes, a few cities. Really, Coppell was the major city that we followed.
Okay. Second question for city attorney. Given the legislation that kicked into place pretty quick to not allow cities to disallow this, what do you see as the future of us using an SUP?
I think you're fine using an SUP. We use SUPs for other uses, sexually oriented businesses, for example. We use SUPs for that. You don't prohibit them, you allow them, but you allow conditions to be imposed by the council to make sure that those uses are compatible. So as long as we don't abuse it or it's not done for an improper reason, I think we're fine.
Okay. And I appreciate the mayor's question that you gave to Mr. Thibodeau on the question of SUPs, because I didn't see it other than the reference you made to the by rights in the Duncanville, downtown Duncanville district. I didn't see the SUP requirement mentioned in your staff report nor in the ordinance itself. I looked several times. Okay.
This would be akin to where we require a restaurant to have an SUP. That allows the use, but they still have to comply with the health code and all the other things that you have to do to have a restaurant. If you have alcohol, you get it, ABC. These are just the regulations for that use once it's allowed.
Okay. Two last questions. On that shared or single use section in there, where someone can just use this as an Airbnb to just stay in a room or share a room with somebody. I'm wondering what you have set up in place to monitor that, to make sure that that doesn't become a boarding room, which are not allowed, correct?
That's correct, yeah. You know, just being very diligent during the inspection process, and then especially when these come up for renewal, going back in, understanding what you saw the year before, what was agreed upon, is in the same manner. You know,
30 days after 30 days after that use is allowed, or that they reach an agreement with the owner of the property, they have to be out, right? They have a 30-day limit by the ordinance.
Yeah, 1 to 30 nights. That's
Okay.
right.
So it's easy when you've got a whole bunch of people in an empty house. When you have an occupied house and they're just renting out one room, that's going to be difficult to monitor,
That is going to be difficult
to
to
know when
monitor.
they leave. Okay.
You know, and we'll rely on citizen input. You know, there's a section here that if it becomes a situation that, you know, is creating major concern, we can go in and access the property after we give notice and all that. So that's when we apply this.
The last question is on 12C55, visitors or guests. You have some limitations in there to seemingly try to control that if it's rented to a couple, say, but they invite a number of people, which was the fears of the group we heard the other night. You put a limitation on parking, but only on private property. So that we can't put a limitation on people parking in the street. So conceivably, if one of these does get, if it passes through the P&Z and through the council, it could be that we have that party situation. We're still open to that. And I just want to point out that limiting the number of people in the house doesn't limit the potential for them to invite a number of guests, and they can all legally park on the street, as many as they want. But I don't see any opportunities for you to add anything to the ordinance to stop that. I just want to make that observation.
Yeah, we set up the complaints to be at 3. This goes back to the zoning ordinance, you know, so we count on those kind of things to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, City Manager, one question coming along with what Mr. Gutierrez has asked. The enforcement / surveillance of this particular aspect of what would be going on in our city would be city services?
Neighborhood services, yes, sir.
Neighborhood services?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to make that clarification. One other point that I'd like to make in terms of looking through the entire document positively is that the residence must be the primary residence of the applicant, and that the applicant may only have one primary residence. I think that's a very positive thing. So it precludes what we went through last time in City Council in terms of that resident that owned that home that was applying for that SUP lived in California. By DCAD, I checked it, by DCAD, that individual resided in California but was owning that property and was desiring to do that short-term rental. So I think the inclusion of this being the primary residence, this is on page 3 of 12. The primary residence is the usual dwelling place of the applicant's residential dwelling and is documented, and go on and on and on, which is a very positive thing. And I think that puts a little more teeth, so to speak, into what we're doing here to make sure that this doesn't become out of control for us. So any other comments? If not, the chair will accept a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mayor.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. McBurnett. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Veracruz. Council, please vote. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Final item on items for individual consideration, item 5B, receive and consider approving the DCEDC fiscal year 22 strategic plan. Mr. Garcia.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, citizens of Duncanville. Gus Garcia with the Duncanville Community Economic Development Corporation. Mayor and Council, as you know...
Time out. Is there something else that's supposed to be on our screen right now?
Matter of fact, there is. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Augustin Garcia, Duncanville Community Economic Development Corporation. I'm here today before you to talk about the Community Economic Development Corporation Strategic Plan. As many of you are aware, we discussed this plan at the council retreat. We've also discussed it with the Economic Development Corporation's retreat. One of the things that we set out to do was a number of goals. When we initially started this, we had a set of 20 to 25 goals that we wanted to accomplish throughout the year, and short-term as well as long-term. We did have a community enhancement plan, but we didn't have a real set strategic plan for the organization. Some of those goals included creating a marketing strategy, addressing some of the blighted strip malls, recruiting a food truck to the community or food truck park, develop a social media strategy and presence along with many, many other goals and objectives that we wanted to accomplish. What we didn't have was a set strategic plan that we could actually bring to this council and have you approve and monitor our progress and eventually evaluate how successful or unsuccessful we were throughout the year. So what we set out to do is create a strategic plan, present it to you as well as our board, have it approved, get your input, any additions or subtractions, as you will. I know that some were made by this council and we incorporated those. So what we have before you today is that strategic plan. Ultimately, the City of Duncanville Community and Economic Development Corporation is pleased to present the department's strategic plan for the 2021-2022 fiscal year. We strongly believe that in order to implement effective change and improve our city, a detailed structure needs to be put in place. This strategic plan will be the foundation of the DCEDC and our future projects to ensure that we can accomplish all our goals. The method that we find to be most efficient is mapping out our projects, creating metrics to keep ourselves focused, and setting deadlines to keep our promise of improving Duncanville. Our residents and businesses deserve our full attention, and that strategic plan is what we have here before you. Redevelopment of a city as built out as Duncanville requires many different simultaneous efforts that require extensive forethought and planning. Raise this up a little bit. The strategic plan will establish a framework to guide, instruct, and focus DCEDC's efforts in a meaningful and productive manner. A strategic plan will also enable better communication and collaboration between EDC staff, the EDC board, and the City Council. With the start of FY 2022, the strategic plan is ready for approval and implementation. As you know, redistricting set us back the implementation, but some first quarter goals are still on track. The core components of the strategic plan would constitute an economic development, community enhancement, and a marketing plan. The first pillar is economic development. It's focused on external business activities, business retention and expansion, small scale, what we call base hits, restaurants, new businesses for the community, catalyst projects. Catalyst projects would be large scale projects that we want to implement in some of our opportunity areas. Legacy projects are very large projects that would be in the 10 to 20 million and above range that would actually be a catalyst for additional growth, additional projects throughout the community. Legacy, as well as legacy projects, small area, special overlay district planning, which we have presented in the past before this council for certain areas that you've designated through our comprehensive plan as opportunity areas within the city of Duncanville. The next pillar would be community enhancement. That would be focused on internal activities, beautification of the city, improving internal departmental cooperation, which we're currently doing, workforce development, and board and commission relations. You'll see in the quarterly report that some of these things are already ongoing, and we've accomplished many of these tasks we've set before us that you and the board have set before us, and we are certainly trying to accomplish those. The third pillar would be a market strategy or marketing strategy that be focused on external perception and improvement of the city of Duncanville through social media, website revamp, asset videos, and traditional marketing efforts through publications and other mediums of that nature. Some of the goals that we've set out or we've accomplished, you'll see in the strategic plan that's within your packet, and it's also here for the public to view. It's digitally before you. We also set out a set of milestones or metrics. At the back of the strategic plan, we've identified each month throughout the year and set out to accomplish each of these tasks. As you can see through the digital copy, some of these goals have already been achieved. I've identified in green those goals that we've already achieved so far through October, November, and now December. Now keep in mind, we did have all hands on deck for the redistricting effort that we were tasked with in, I believe, at the middle of November, which we accomplished on the December 7th meeting, which wasn't part of our strategic goal, but we did adapt and overcome, as you often do in any organization. So some of those goals are before you that have been accomplished. Some are in progress, as you can see in orange, what appears to be in a beige almost on the screen. And you can also see some of those November goals. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have regarding the strategic plan. Thank you.
One question, Mr. Garcia, you just, on that last chart that you showed with the green, orange, and red, typically that is presented in a Gantt chart. But looking at what you just showed us and looking at what's in our package on page, 32 and 33 of the plan, it's identified by blocks of time and date. I was wondering if you might consider using a Gantt chart, because sometimes it'd be much easier to read in terms of progress of what's being done. Just a suggestion to think about if you wanted to
For
incorporate
quarterly
something in the
updates on what
Gantt
we're
chart
doing, yes.
with the red, orange, and green. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mayor, to answer your question, I think you'll be pleased to see that in the next presentation is our quarterly report, and that's going to be one of the things we're going to be presenting before you on how we're going to be tracking some of these goals and objectives, and I think this council will be very pleased to see the method of tracking that we're going to be implementing. All of this was approved by you through our budgeting process. So these are some of the goals that we set out to accomplish, and you'll get to see firsthand and have some interactive discussion on how we're going to track some of those goals. And we do have a Gantt chart currently within our system. We actually have one of our team members who's somewhat of an expert within our organization. That would be Mr. Clay Manzel. So he's going to be presenting some of that to you today. So thank you for that.
So it's already done, just a matter of throwing in an appendix or something like that into what we see before us tonight.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's see, Mr. Contreras, then Mr. Kuntz, please.
I'm glad you put this screen up, the one that's up there right now, because my question in reading through this a few days ago was to use November as an example and tell me how you were tracking that, and here you are tracking it right in front of me. Having said that, what does it mean up here, red equals awaiting competition of a prerequisite?
So as an example, November goal, so we want a food truck park. I know this council wants a food truck park. You have passed an ordinance for a food truck park. Thank you for that. And so that was one of the goals that we set out to work collaboratively, as we mentioned in our goals, with other departments. One of the things that our city manager, as you know, has done some reorganization and some restructuring within the organization. So Development Services, which is a new department, now oversees economic development, as well as planning and zoning and legislative advocacy. So in our quarterly report, you'll hear a little bit about some of those changes and how we have collaboratively worked towards those efforts. So regarding awaiting competition, to answer your question, Council Member, the application for the food truck is currently ongoing, and we're working with planning and zoning, public works, fire, and building permits to get that accomplished so we can have our first food truck in the city of Duncanville. So there's a process for that to happen, so we're currently working on that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kuntz.
Thank you, Mayor. Where are we as far as the updating the EDC website? I know that goes along with the city website, but and is that in our schedule anywhere to have that updated?
It's an excellent question. Thank you for that, Councilmember Coots, if I may, Mayor. And I recall when you had actually had a discussion regarding our website, how you wanted those to be implemented. We are currently in the process of working on that. One of the things that we want is an asset video. That's part of our goals. So we have an initiative called the Golden Plate campaign, which is an effort to attract more restaurants. One of the things that we needed was the ability to not only track our progress, but to have a Gantt chart to notify you of who we're contacting, how we're contacting them, and the number of projects that are ongoing. Having a robust website is a big part of that through our marketing initiatives. So what you're going to see in the presentation before you on the quarterly report is the answer to that question. And an asset video is going to be crucial to those companies that we're actually trying to attract, which we call prospecting. So when they click onto our website, they'll see an asset video of Duncanville and what we are about. And we have one chance to make a first impression. We want to make sure that first impression is great. So that is coming, and it's on our goals for January to have that completed. So we've already completed the storyboard of the video, so we're in the process of videotaping it.
Oh, that's great. I'm excited to see that.
Thank you.
And also I wanted to ask about the Placer AI, or where are we as far as
Okay.
that project?
We have now implemented, and you'll be getting a first-hand interactive presentation by Mr. Manzel on that program, and I think you'll find some pretty awesome information when you see it.
Okay. And I just had one other question on the Appendix 1, the budget items. What's the $30,000 Duncanville Community Leader?
Oh, okay, so that was a typographical error. We have multiple people looking at this and modifying it, and it was actually Duncanville Community Theater. And last year's allocation was $30,000. This year, this council increased it to 32, an additional 2,000, so it's actually 32. And it has been updated in your packet, and so it now reflects the correct information.
Yeah, the digital version of this in our packet has already been, that typo's been corrected.
Okay, thank you.
It's already fixed.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so what's your, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cooks.
Mr. Gus, thank you, excellent presentation. I'm sure we'll have more questions as we go along, but I would like to know, how will you implement this to tell the Duncanville story outside of Duncanville?
So what we're doing is we have, as you recall, back when we had some work sessions on the marketing plan, we called it the top of mind marketing initiative. So through equity attraction and trying to get more businesses to come into Duncanville and promote Duncanville, we felt it was important to tell our story through a series of videos. This council approved a budget after the recommendation by my board, or our board, to implement a series of videos. Through those videos, we would do a number of things. One was, first and foremost, was creating an asset video telling the story of Duncanville, which would entail interviewing some of the council members, the mayor, of course, our city manager, economic development, and some of our local businesses by highlighting them just to kind of tell a story of what Duncanville's about. Throughout the course of the last 7 months since I've been here, we've taken some, what they call B-roll video of some of the events that have taken place. As an example, B-roll video of our parade, B-roll video of the Duncanville Classic, as another example. So the amount, just the vibrant activities that take place, parade, events, functions that we currently have in the city of Duncanville. Those are stories we want to tell. Additionally, what we want to do is do a series of interviews with our local business owners and our local citizens telling us why Duncanville is great, why you want to move to Duncanville, why you want to live in Duncanville, why you want to do business in Duncanville, and why we need more restaurants, why we need more businesses, and why we're a thriving and very and growing community. So these are the things that we plan to do through different videos, marketing efforts, which you'll see in the presentation by Mr. Manzel. I keep referring to Mr. Manzel and the presentation he'll do, but a lot of these questions will be answered during that process.
Okay, but I guess my other part of the question is, as you talk about telling a story, I was looking for maybe an outline of your strategy of shows. Is it going to the Regional Chamber Economic Development? Is it going to the Red Best Southwest? I guess I was trying to look and see where do you go from here? You got the story. Now where do you go to tell the story?
Okay, well, the first thing, there's a number of things we would do. Obviously, social media is a big part of it. Regional magazines, like for instance, the Dallas Regional Chamber and some of the publications they work with, the Dallas Development Guide, we would market through that medium, which is a magazine. We do have a storyboard, which has about 20 different items that we're going to be relaying to the community. That's also going to be on our website. So there would be a storyboard of all the things, very similar to the State of the City storyboard video. So we're going to have that video online, obviously, and then we're going to promote it through Google Ad Space. We're going to promote it through Zillow, Trulia, some of these things that, as we know, people are moving to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and so we want to promote it through there. One of the other things that we're doing, and I don't want to give away too much of our strategy, but as an example, we would be marketing through LinkedIn. We would identify some of the developers within the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We know for a fact that the top 20 developers in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex are investing currently anywhere between $8 and $11 billion in the DFW Metroplex on new development. Many of these are redevelopment. So what we would do through LinkedIn is market, first off, acquire their subscription or like our page, and then we hit them with different ads that we do, whether it be an asset video or whether it be a blog video or something that we put out that talks about Duncanville. For example, Duncanville is the place you want to redevelop. Duncanville is the epicenter of redevelopment. Duncanville is a first-tier, first-ring community. Duncanville is closer to DFW or to Dallas downtown than any other city within our area. We've also included some narratives on the Best Southwest Regional Planning Report talking about Duncanville and some of the facts that we know exist. For instance, Duncanville's schools are the highest rated schools in the Best Southwest region, so we would highlight and we talk about that. And so we know through all the factors that we've been monitoring that there's a lot of development, whether it be in the distribution, inland port, that people are not only moving here, but they're moving to the DFW area. So we want to take information and show that the cost of living, the cost of commute, the cost of housing, the redevelopment initiatives, the demolition programs that we have, the policies that we've talked about and how we can also assist people that want to move here. For instance, if you take a home, one of our older housing stock, and you demolish it, you can get $15,000 in incentives. If it's over $100,000, you get up to $20,000 or more. So these are the things we're talking about as well. So we, for instance, we would promote on Trulia or Zillow or Hot Pads. And so people that would move to Duncanville, or move to the DFW market, I should say, they would see an ad that would come out. And then they would click on that ad, and the first thing they would see is an asset video about what Duncanville's about, where they actually get to see you talking, they get to see citizens talking, they get to see business owners talking, they get to see kids playing in the playground, they get to see our website, which will be their first impression. So many times in this day of technology, people don't have to visit a community firsthand. They just go on and say, do I want to live in Duncanville? We got to make sure that their first impression is a great one. Not only great, but better than great. Out of this world great, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish.
Hey, I think it's called the QR, is it the QRP code?
A QR code?
QR code?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have QR codes that'll directly be able to link and go to those sites.
Yes, sir.
All right, my last question here. I know you're part of the Best Southwest Red Summit, and the information I've just heard about the Red Summit was talking about there's 110,000 people that travels from the Best Southwest to go up north to work, and there are 55,000 people that travels that travels back, and you know that better than I do. Will you be using any of that information in your in this strategic plan?
So that is a very powerful report. It absolutely is the case for every city within the Best Southwest region. Many of these employees, what we call the workforce, it's called the, I'm forgetting the term right now, but I want to say workforce shed. Anyway, long story short, it details what you're talking about. And we certainly would show that many of our community is commuting to go work someplace else. So for large employers that would be looking for the region, even though we don't have green space, we know that they're moving to this region, whether it be Mansfield or whether it be Red Oak or whether it's, Cedar Hill, but they have to live somewhere. And sometimes the difference between somebody buying a house in Duncanville and somewhere else could be that demolition program. So at the end of the day, if you had hundreds of people moving to the Best Southwest region and they were aware of our demolition program, that $15,000 or $20,000 is the difference between a home loan and not getting a home loan, because that helps them with their down payment, et cetera. So these are the things that we would be focusing on.
The reason I've even asked that, because I think it brings value to know that our workforce that we have in Duncanville and the Best Southwest is it's very strong, and so having that in this particular plan would also help future employers to know that the workforce we already have locally in our city here. So that's why I was wondering if you're going to inject any of that information into your plan. But
actually, yes, we're actually going to do better than that. And there's going to be the program that we talked about that we presented at an earlier date, which was the Placer AI, that's going to kind of show you how we can utilize that information and target those people. Not just that, but we can assist our local business community. This is the type of information they can't afford, and something we can provide them as a service to our business community to make them more successful. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these things in the presentation, which I'm alluding to now, which I'll highlight once I get to them.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the document Mr. Cooks is referring to was compiled by Dallas College, the Cedar Valley campus. Dr. Joe Seabrooks was the leader on that and putting that together. And it is the very first time in his knowledge, and I think in any of our knowledge, that that type of compilation of data has never been done before. It is extremely valuable in terms of.
So it's called our labor shed.
Yeah.
Our workforce labor shed is what it's called. I couldn't remember a minute ago.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're looking for, as I see it on our agenda, is an approval of the strategic plan as presented to us, a consent for it, or a vote saying this is it, it's in concrete, move forward. Exactly what are we voting on tonight?
You're voting on approval of our strategic plan, which we will follow going forward for the next year.
Okay.
And so this will go on our website. It'll be for the public to view at any time they want to know and track our progress, as well as the council tracking our progress. And this is all based on the comprehensive plan, just so everyone knows.
Okay, so council, what we're looking for is a motion to approve the strategic plan as presented to us with the single addition of putting the Gantt chart that's prepared already and making it an appendix to this. So, Mr. McBurnett.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion approved by Mr. McBurnett, second by Mr. Contreras. Council, please vote. Approved unanimously.
Are we selling those books?
I'm sorry?
Are we selling those books?
Oh, no, we're not selling them. We don't want to kill too many trees. That's why we have a digital copy. But certainly if the citizens want a copy, we'd certainly provide one for them.
Well, I want to make sure citizens can get their hands on it and look at it for themselves too.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I will comment that what this represents, I believe, is a new era in economic development for the city of Duncanville.
Yeah.
Refreshing and very, very new. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 6, staff and board reports. Received the economic development quarterly report. Is
Thank
it
you, Mayor.
you
So
or
we-
Mr. Mansell?
So both Mr. Manziel and myself will be presenting to you today. So Gus Garcia, Managing Director for Development Services. So one of the things is, as we hold these retreats and we work with our consultants in explaining to us what is the best practice for management and being able to hold and continue to have an efficient department is, he says, you need to practice failure. And so one of those things is, in the event that I'm not here, obviously, Mr. Manziel would have to come before this council and present. As you recall, I believe last council meeting, our city planner was out of town, and I actually stepped in. So these are some of the things we're going to be practicing. You know, the event if something happens to me or one of our managers or somebody to fill the gaps and be here and present before you. So we hit the ground running. We don't have any gaps in service to the community as well as this council. So what you have before you today is our economic development quarterly report. It's going to be in 2 parts, possibly 3, if I come back and address you again. So the first part, I'm going to go over the traditional information that we present to you, and then the second part is going to be a little bit more exciting. So mine's going to be somewhat boring. Although I don't find it boring. You may not find it boring either, but it's going to be kind of routine. So one of the things you know that we always track is the top employers, and we consider that to be part of diversification. We look at the top 10 sales tax companies. Where do we get our sales tax from? The state of real estate, which we presented. You've already seen some of these. So we're just tracking this stuff to make sure if there's an anomaly or something happens, it's just the checks and balances to make sure that we don't miss anything, and this council is always aware of what's happening. We look at departmental activity, what we've been doing, and then, of course, new developments. So Mr. Manziel is going to talk to you about department activity that'll address some of the things I just mentioned, and then new developments, which will also address some of the things we just mentioned. And so those are the things Mr. Manziel will talk to you about. Part 1 is employer, taxpayer, real estate, hospitality, consumer demographics, sales tax, and industry analysis, which will be by me. So as you can see, our top 10 employers hasn't really changed much. You're familiar with this report. We don't have the final number on the new employer that we mentioned the last meeting, but we're estimating it's going to be about 120, which will move up the chart. As you know, I don't think, that's Automan, which is the 350,000 square foot warehouse that's going out in Duncanville Road, which we all know is the old Nance property. Top 10 taxpayers, this hasn't changed very much. You're very familiar with these. So I'll move along. The next is the state of real estate. And so you can see we continue to monitor these trends. One of the things that I will talk about is in the last report, our white-collar workforce was at 61%. We are now at 63 and change, almost 64%. So we've had an uptick in our white-collar workforce. We also employed an additional 500 employees within our job market or within our labor market, which was progress, obviously. Some of those jobs, obviously, were in the white-collar area, and we had a decrease in the services department. It went from 14% to 11%. So obviously, we're tracking that. We had a bit of an increase in our college-educated workforce, which was important. Some of the things we also track is how is the spending? What is our citizens spending their money on? This is important from a prospecting standpoint, as well as us just to have an idea of where our citizens are spending their money. You can see here from the report that on an annual spend, our household is about $3,019 per household, which equates, based on the number of households, to about $43 million annually. So based on the reports we get from some of the software, which is Esri that we utilize, we know that in meals and entertainment, the city of Duncanville and the citizens in our community spend anywhere between $84 and $85 million annually on meals and entertainment. On any given month, you're going to see them spending anywhere from about $316 to any given year annually, you'll see them spending about $316 on breakfast per household, $974 on lunch, and about $1,476 on dinner. So overwhelmingly, they spend more money on dinner as well as lunch. Now, this is important because some of the prospects we're looking at are diners and breakfast establishments. So I know that this council has asked for some of those types of venues, so we're certainly looking at those things. And you also see life spending index. Now, why is that important? The index is based on a score of 100. So if you're over 100, as an example, if you're at 120 on your index, that means you spend approximately 20% more than the national average. As you can see from our lifestyle spending index, we're at about 83% on meals, 83% of the national average, 82% on apparel and services of the national average, 80% on entertainment and recreation, 83% on home services, and 82% on retail goods. Now, at first glance, that would look like a negative to maybe a lot of people in the community, but what it tells us is there's a shortage. We should be at 100 of the national average, so there's opportunity there. So this is the type of information we would provide to prospectors, that we don't spend enough. Our citizens are spending money elsewhere. We're not spending what the national average will be. We want to increase that spend so that they're spending things here in this community. And that'll be some of the information we provide to prospects, because we want to be at a minimum 100, right? If we're over, that means that we're spending more than the national average here locally. So that's important to also identify. Trends we continue to monitor is office and retail, multifamily, and industrial. So we take this and we look at the regional activity. So you can see there from the information provided that we're going to go over in a minute, we're going to look at, what is the average vacancy rate? What's the average price per square foot? What's the cap rate in some of these areas? So we'll grab properties that were either recently sold or leased out in that location. You can see kind of in the middle of the area there, I don't know if I have a pointer. Well, I'll point out with the mouse.
Just guide us to it.
Anyway, so that's basically the area. You can see the area highlighted in the light yellow, the area we're looking at. And so in the
One moment.
hospitality,
Excuse me, can you go back to that last chart, please?
Yes.
Could you define very briefly the cap rate?
Yes. So the cap rate is a function of what would be the return on a property if you leased it out or if you purchased it. What would be the return on investment based on net operating income and the amount that's invested in that property. Typically on real estate, you want a cap rate that's somewhere in the neighborhood between 5 and 6%. That's where you want to be at. Anytime it gets over that, the bank or investors feel like there's something wrong. So what does that mean? If you're getting a high return on your cap rate or net operating income based on your investment, what they tend to feel is that you're not investing back in your property, that you're making a lot of money off your investment. So like any property that you would invest in, you're not going to have, you've got to take care of it. You have to maintain it. You have to put in the proper maintenance and upkeep, and you don't want to have deferred maintenance on it. So what you have is, if you have a high cap rate and you look at the market values and rent rates per square foot, if it's high, or it's what the national average is, but yet your market caps are higher, what it shows is you're making more income on your investment. So your market cap or your net operating income over your investment is high. Now typically the average, or what is expected, is going to be about a 5 or 6%. That's what the going rate should be. So what does that tell you? That tells you that you're making the proper investment in your property, so you're not deferring maintenance. So as an example, I'm going to take a company as an example. So many companies across the nation, when they look at stocks, they say, you know what, a company like Coca-Cola or Microsoft or Apple, they make a lot of investments in research and development, or they make a huge investment in marketing. So their average return or annual return can be anywhere between 8, 10, 15%. If they really wanted to, they could get you a 40% return. But the reality is, if you're getting a 40% return, you're probably not spending what you should in marketing and growing your company, research and development, et cetera, as a kind of a gross analogy. So it's the same thing with property. If you're putting the right amount of money into maintenance and you're upkeeping your property, well, then you can only make so much money on that property based on your investment, on what the value of it is, and based on your net operating income, what you're making after expenses. So they want to see about a 5 or 6, at the most 6.5 cap rate on your property, because it tells you a couple things. Number one, they're going to look at your average price per square foot what's the value of the building, they're going to look what it costs to make an investment, and what's going to be your return based on the charge per square foot as far as rent rates or what your investment is. So you want to see a cap rate that's basically indicative of you maintaining and putting the investment back into your development or your property. So right now, if we look at the cap rate, the average cap rate within this region of 52 properties or sales comparables, it's 7.8. So it's higher than where we want it to be. So when we're looking at this region, we're going to compare it to what our cap rates are. So at the end of the day, we want our cap rates to be at least what the region is, but we always want to strive to do better. So what does that mean? That means that any blighted buildings, we want to make sure and get those back to where they should be so that we can charge the right amount, invest the right amount, which is where economic development comes in. We want to incentivize companies to do more maintenance or facade improvement, which is why you've approved that as part of our policy. So I don't know if that explains it, Mayor.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, we looked at the regional area and what their cap rates, what their average price per square foot is, what the cap rate is, and over a number of comparables. So another thing that we track is hospitality. We want to see how our hotels are doing. As you can see on the top line at Q1 F20, well, I'm happy to report that it's increasing. We're steadily increasing, and the average daily rents are going up. Our vacancies are going down. And so we want to continue to monitor this and make sure that trend continues. And so what you see there is on the top line, Q1 of fiscal year 2022, you see a 68% occupancy rate, up about 2.5%, or 2% up from the prior quarter, which was the report we gave you earlier. You can see that our 12-month average daily rent is $87, about $4 higher than it was in our last quarter report. So all these are positive indicators that the market is coming back for our hotel community. Okay, so we're just monitoring that, and if we ever see an anomaly or something goes dip, we want to know why. So you're going to see from Mr. Manzel's presentation that these are things we're going to track with our business community to make sure that they can tell us, hey, look, this is what's happening. As an example, through our meeting with our hospitality community or hoteliers, they're telling us that they don't need help during the weekend. They need help during the week. Our hotels during the weekend are full. So we need to find ways to track and improve our stays during the middle of the week, whether that means conventions or it means having trainings within our, the centers that we have, things of that nature. So we're going to be tracking that as well. You can see as part of, one of the things we also look at is lifestyle spend. This is just information for your benefit. You can see that on average our citizens they spend about $2,000 annually on travel. On movies, museum, and parks, about $78. On audio, $90, sporting events, $52, theater, operas, and concerts, about $64. So we're just tracking that, and so I'm presenting that to you today. Sales tax performance. As you can see, in fiscal year 2022, we were at $2,872,513. So we had an increase of the first quarter, which was October, November, and December. We're tracking at about a 7.45% increase. Now, you're going to see something in a minute. You're going to see a dip in the month of December. As you're probably aware, we had discussed this in the budget meeting that one of our businesses was undergoing an audit because there was an allocation that wasn't collected. And so we can discuss in detail which business that was, but it was a significant allocation that wasn't collected, and so the audit hit us for that, and so we have a bit of a decrease, but I'll discuss that in a minute. And that's it right there. So it's highlighted in yellow. As you can see, in 2021, the month of December, we had $830,000. And so in the year of 2022, in the month of December, we had a $785,000 allocation. Net for the whole year, or this fiscal quarter, or this fiscal year, we had a 7.45% increase. Now, that's a little bit misleading, but as I mentioned, we had an audit that was finalized by the state comptroller for monies that wasn't collected in 2020. So they came back and they collected that. The actual allocation or sales tax that was collected, if you give me a minute, I have it here, was $947,952. And so there was an audit collection of approximately $167,963. That was an allocation from 2020 that they collected. Now, we did have the option to take it in payments, but we took it in one hit. And because we had an actual almost 15% increase over last year, the net result was about a $44,561,000 decrease. Or, as you see from your report, so from last year, this year was about a 5.3% decrease on total collections for the year. But that's only because we had an audit from prior year that they allocated, or they withheld.
Mr. Garcia, Mr. Harvey has a question, please.
Yes.
So the results of the audit indicated that back in '20, we got some other governmental entities' money, and that's why the decrease occurred?
No, sir. What happened in 2020 was they failed to collect on one of our taxpayers, one large taxpayer. And so there was an audit at the state, and they identified the non-allocation or the non-collection. And so we were notified in 2021 that it would be coming, and we budgeted accordingly. We just didn't know when it was going to hit, and so it hit in December. And it was a $167,000 credit, I guess you'd call it, or audit collection by the state. So we actually had a $947,000 current period collection, minus the $167,963, which ended in a net $785,673, which is before you today. So the reason why I'm bringing it up is because obviously we track these.
I'm still confused. I'll take it up later.
So what I can do is we did consult with our sales tax consultant. I can actually read the comment, or I can give it to you so you can see exactly what it was.
Mayor, I'm a little uncomfortable as having a public discussion about a taxpayer in public. I think you're entitled to the information. I just don't think it's appropriate to do it now.
Agree. Move on, Mr. Garcia, please.
So this is just industry segmentation. It's showing that we didn't have a net decrease in each of the industries. You've seen this report before. So obviously one of the things that we look at is if there's any industry or segments that are having or receiving an impact from any kind of sales tax collection. Here is also the segmentation by each individual industry. So we have our major industries, which is retail trade, lodging, food service, wholesale trade, utilities, and unidentified. And below that is all the other unidentified. So we track these to see if there's any anomalies or anything that might hit us that we'd like to be aware of. And so you also have a pie chart that identifies, obviously the largest sales tax allocation is retail trade, followed by lodging and food services, as well as other segments. And you can see the other segments as they're presented before you.
Has that ranking, I don't know, you presented this.
Mr. Coons, please turn your microphone on. Let me indicate you
Thank
want to
you.
speak. Go ahead,
Thank you.
please.
Has that ranking changed very much as far as the top 10 taxpayers? The ones at the top generally are toward the top, but for example, Winco Foods, I feel like that dropped since past reports.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So some of these, for the most part, they stay the same, the top 10. We track the top 100, which is the next slide. But a couple of them vacillate between 5 and 6, or 7 and 8, or 2 and 3. But for the most part, these are our largest taxpayers within the community.
Thank you.
So the next slide is to talk about business diversity. We also track the number of businesses. Obviously, we're not going to provide each individual business, and we've kind of taken this and we've, switched it up so we can't tell who's who. But we track to see if there's any major decreases in the top 100 sales tax generators. And this slide is basically to show you that we have a very diverse business community, and we receive our sales tax from a number of different businesses and entities. So this is something we look at to make sure that we're basically stabilized, if you will. Now, we do have the top 10 that we currently track as well, but for the most part, it's just to show you that the top 100 businesses, how they're performing, and we track those as well and look for any anomalies. So with that is part 2, and so I'm going to introduce Mr. Clay Manzel, the Economic Development Manager.
Mr. Cooks?
I just want to make sure this is the Clay Manzel that Gus has been talking about all night, so I want to make sure this was the Clay, because he said it so many times tonight, I want to make sure this was him.
In the flesh, sir. Well, first, before I begin, I would just like to say, as we said earlier, Merry Christmas, everyone, and I hope that 2022 is a much better year than the last year, and we were a little optimistic in the beginning of the year with the vaccine, and as the mayor pointed out, things have started to get a little more rocky, but here's to the next year. So, good evening. I am Clay Mansell, the Economic Development Manager, and tonight I'll be going over some new developments in the city, as well as some of the new technology that we've discussed in previous meetings that we have finally gotten the licenses for. So, in the Q1 of fiscal year 2022, we are tracking more than 29 projects right now. You were presented a great many of those projects at your council retreat. On legislative advocacy, we have a legislative update report that is pretty much 99% ready to go. With the development in our redistricting here in the city, we have decided to add that to the report, so that should be finished in the next day or so, and we will have that out to you and the public as well. So we just need a little bit more time to finish that. We are on track, as we discussed earlier, with some of our marketing efforts. We're in the process of really a multifaceted approach: articles, a podcast, the asset videos we've discussed, social media with the website. We have been working very closely with our PIO, Mr. Hamby, to work on our website and make sure that we have a really snazzy website. So to talk about that real fast, our target audience is, of course, a more external regional audience, regional developers, national publications. They love to talk about DFW being a hot market as if it's sort of a monolith. It's not. We're a very diverse region of North Texas, and most of the development is happening in the northern suburbs with greenfield development, while we are in the south with redevelopment opportunities. One thing that's really kind of on the cutting edge of economic development is the emergence of adaptive reuse, and there's a very persuasive argument that the greenest building is the one that's already built. And so as we look towards sustainable practices, since we already have a stock here that we can redevelop, that puts us actually, I think, in a really good position going forward. So that's something that we're, again, going to market ourselves as. The food truck ordinance passed, and almost a day or two after it passed, we had a food truck that we immediately started working with to get them set up. It was just one of those things where it's just almost manna from heaven falls right in your lap, right? And we worked with them to kind of the first one, right? Immediately put them through the process. They've submitted all their paperwork and their things to get the permit process going. So they are in that process right now. We are working with them to get them through that, and hopefully in the new year we should have food truck set up and ready to go. We've sent out a numerous amount of incentive applications to businesses, roughly 15 or so in the last year since Director Garcia was first onboarded. 3 were returned. 1 was not properly completed, and therefore was just kind of automatically rejected. They also completed the work before they submitted the application, which of course per our guidelines does not qualify them for incentives. 2 were presented at the most recent DC EDC board meeting. 1 was denied for work beginning after they submitted the application, but before the board had a chance to vote on it. And 1 was tentatively approved and was tabled till the next meeting, in which we will bring some more develop agreement language to the board, and they can either, again, approve the development agreement language and move forward or deny it. We are assisting a local medical system in operating a job fair of more than 70 medical-related careers in our region, Best Southwest region. The details for this will be released again in the new year in the early part once we have the details finalized, and that should be a really great opportunity for our workforce. In October, Gus and I had the pleasure of attending the IEDC and the TEDC. Sorry about that. Conferences in Nashville and Fort Worth, respectively. It was a really great opportunity to learn and network with other economic development professionals. And many of the things that we learned in some of these workshops and best practices, we had a chance to incorporate into our strategic plan. Director Garcia was able to attend 3 regional board meetings, a Best Southwest one, a meeting with Encore in DeSoto, as well as the council retreat, in which some of our objectives were presented. So far, we have authorized a total of $148,000 in hot tax monies in fiscal year 2022. Those events still need to happen and then submit their post-event reforms before money is ultimately given out, but we have authorized that so far. We have a new DC EDC board member, Kadeem Collins, and he had his first meeting last Wednesday. I think I could speak for our department when we say we were incredibly impressed and we really enjoyed working with him, so we look forward to collaborating with him and the rest of our board on some really great things in the future. In the first quarter of fiscal year 2022, we had 15 new applications for certificate of occupancies and 39 were issued. And we, of course, went over our strategic plan earlier, and now I will get into our I think the thing that was kind of hyped up, our Blue Dot and our Placer presentation. Hopefully the expectations are, meet those expectations. So first and foremost, I'll get into Placer, and then I'll do a walkthrough in Blue Dot afterwards. These two programs are very distinct. They're two separate companies with two very different objectives, but they complement each other very well in what we're trying to accomplish. So Placer AI is a consumer location and foot traffic program that will enable the team to understand where people are going and what they do when they get there. It'll help us identify market strengths, weaknesses, and market the city and reach out to prospective businesses with quantitative information. We can say X amount of people go to this business every year. Now we can actually prove that. They get their data from a variety of sources. Predominantly, everyone has a cell phone. Every time you download an app, you have to approve the tracking information and stuff like that. They get it from that, but they also get information from Bureau of Labor Statistics for careers, census data, and other private and public sources. If you own $1 million house, chances are you're probably in a certain demographic, and that means you spend a certain kind of money, right? So they get a wide variety. Oh, yes, sir.
Go back. You just mentioned so you can track where these businesses or where people, attendees are going for a place. Will that be coincided with these all the hot funds monies? Will that connect? We'll be able to see that as well.
That's actually the case study that I'm going to show you guys tonight. Because if I was to go over every single feature of Placer, we would be here all night, and I know you guys don't want that. So what we're going to do tonight is our case study is the Duncanville Classic game that happened back in August.
Okay.
Cool thing with Placer, we can carve out that place and time in Panther Stadium, and we can show everyone who came in and everyone who left.
All right, thank you.
And we can look at some of the information there. So that's a really great point. And so as we look at events, hot tax money that help increase tourism to the city, we can actually see where those people are coming from, if they stay in the city or if they leave after the event. So that's actually the case study we have tonight. The Matter Day football game versus Duncanville High School, August 27th, 2021. In terms of visitors, we had 12,400 visitors who attended Panther Stadium that night. And there's a little more information here. The average dwell time, 162 minutes, typical football game, right? And so what we're really focused on is where those people came from. Pretty obviously, most of those people came from the DFW area and the LA market. Matter Day is a high school in Santa Fe, California, in the LA suburbs. And so what we were able to see right here is demographically who these people were. And actually, roughly 54% of those visitors make over $60,000 a year. And we can actually break it down into the specific numbers. There's also a racial demographic breakdown as well. For all of the visitors attending, there was a median household income of $65.5 thousand. And with Placer, it actually breaks it down even further, and we can actually see the exact zip codes in which they came from. So 27.45% of our visitors came from Dallas suburbs outside of the city. 12.7% came from Duncanville, about 5% from DeSoto, Cedar Hill, Lancaster right there. So from Dallas and the best Southwest represented about 51% of our total visitors, which is about 6,393 people. Outside of our region, again, here's kind of the breakdown per zip code, Grand Prairie, Fort Worth, Irving, Red Oak, so on and so forth. So from Texas alone, we had 70% of our visitors, 8,725 people. And so from California, again, we're trying to bring outside money in to spend money here, hotel stays, meals, things like that. This event was actually pretty good for us in terms of 15.39% of our visitors were from California, from this region. They, of course, came here, they have to stay here. And so there were, Placer kind of reported the top 40 zip codes. So there were some visitors that weren't accounted for in zip codes, about 12.7%. This could account for sort of anomalies, for example, children with phones. They don't own houses, they don't have jobs, they don't have consumer data, right? But they still entered and left with their phones, right? So that's what that kind of non-zip code visitors accounts for, is those sort of anomalies. They still visited, but they don't have, like I said, jobs and stuff like that. So this is just kind of a breakdown. We actually had visitors from Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, all the way up to Kansas-Missouri border. So we actually had a pretty good distribution. And again, it visualizes where people came from to our event. So in terms of the visitor journey, this is where predominantly most people came from. About 54% came from their home. 8.4% came from work. 3% from the Hilton Garden Inn. Those are most likely the team staying at the hotels. And then after the event, again, there's that breakdown. I guess, when I played soccer in high school, after every game, everyone goes to the Whataburger, right? So that's not a surprise there that after the game, that's where people went. So just to kind of break down a little further, again, kind of going with that green-red divide, for our top 10 locations, about 8.7% of people, which is about 1,000, visited a Duncanville location, or they came from a Duncanville location before going to the stadium. And about 8.37% of people went to a Duncanville location after the game. So that's good. It's only about 24 additional people, but still. And about 528 people came from an external location before going, but a significant amount of people from outside of our city, they left. So they didn't stay after the game, either to get a meal, get a drink, hang out, they left. And so if we look at it from the top 40 locations, it gets a little bit less optimistic, I guess. Might not be the best term, but 14% of people visit a location, but only 11% visit a location afterwards. Again, so people are leaving our city after the game. And about 11% came from an external location, 19% left the city. And so what that says to us, and again, it kind of breaks it down, what that says to us is kind of what we've been saying, but now we have quantifiable information that we need to expand our options for people to enjoy our city. They're coming here, now we need them to stay. So that's what's really great about this app is, that's kind of just been kind of, I guess, the intuitive feeling, but now we have information to prove it. And that's what site selectors are looking for. That's what developers are looking for. They need the numbers to make their numbers work. So now with this application, we have that. And we can show, hey, we have a lot of people coming to our city for sporting events, things like that. Now we need things here to make them stay, right? So that's kind of the overview of Placer. Before I get into Blue Dot, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, okay, great, thank you. But yeah, we're very excited about it. I'll kind of get into a new, with Blue Dot, I'll be able to actually show you on the fly. Should have it brought up already. Let's see. Appreciate it. Blue Dot is a project management system in which we'll be able to track the projects every time. So once we have the information, if we were to go to a business and try to secure things for Duncanville, we need to be able to manage it. So within Blue Dot, it's a really interesting, very lightweight project management system. We can actually kind of look at certain things.
Clay, I think for recording purposes, in order to make, as this becomes public, I think you have to use the microphone or give them just swing it that way so it gets recorded. Okay,
I think
thank
that
you.
might be a little better. So within Blue Dot, one of the features is email integration. What we can do, and you can kind of see it here, is once we sync our emails, our work emails, every time we communicate with a business, it automatically integrates in this program. So we're still in the process. We've only had this program for about a day or two. But here, already it's starting to populate. So from 25 businesses, we've had 657 interactions with them. So, sorry. Thank you. So one of the features in it, beyond that is kind of the metrics. Sorry for throwing all these numbers at you tonight, but one of the things too that we can kind of look at is we can assign tasks to people. And so as we look at the Gantt chart long term, again, we can pull from this and we can put it in that format, and when we do our quarterly reports, we can present that to you. So one of the things we created just as to show you this program, you'll have to forgive the name, but Clay's Crab Shack is just our business for the night. It's obviously a fake business just to kind of highlight things. We don't want to be giving away, I guess, private information of the individuals who have certain businesses. And because it's already starting to integrate some of our emails, again, you know, some of our negotiations, what we're trying to do, we don't want that showing up. But within that, we can assign tasks. So for here, for example, I have assigned to myself, send an incentive application for facade improvement to this business. There's the due date, so by the 23rd, I have by 5 p.m. to do this. And again, so when we look at the Gantt chart and we can include some of these time frames, it just helps us do it, and also track some of the, you know, additions as well. Let's see, custom features, group email. One of the things we have done already is part of our strategic plan we discussed earlier was a survey to businesses. And so, again, we want feedback from our business leaders, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are. And so already we have sent out an application. Let's see, sorry. So again, we can send out the thing. There's read metrics, not read metrics for the individuals. I won't show the recipient list again for confidential purposes. But within that, we can send surveys. So one survey we sent out today was a business engagement survey. And so within this, we can craft the questions and we can send this out. And we literally sent this out around 4 p.m. today. We've already gotten responses back. These are legitimate responses. These aren't the fake business I created. These are actual business in our community. And so we took questions from the comprehensive plan that they used in their appendix to craft theirs. For example here, what would you consider to be Duncanville's greatest opportunity? And we've had people respond, creating a walkable mixed-use development and our downtown. And so within this, we can get immediate feedback from our businesses on what we're trying to do in the city. So for example, park system, appearance of the city, public art, all of these different questions we send to them, we get it immediately in a quantifiable way. And a feature that we hope to integrate eventually is a business directory. This is an option that they offer to us. We don't have it quite yet. It is additional money, but kind of the communications we've been having is that it might be a feature that we might like to do. And so one of the things is all of our city are right here. And so, for example, if we wanted to look up any business, City of Utah, for example, they're right there. We have all their information, and let's say we get information that needs to be updated, we can go into their profile and we can update their details as needed. We can help them increase communication, things like that. And we can also, again, within that, assign tasks to each other. So if I or Mr. Garcia have to do anything, we can, again, do that rather than just emailing back and forth. And we can actually communicate with the businesses right here in the app. We can message them, email them right here, and it populates it right there. So all of our correspondence, all of our interactions, if we send them a survey, send them an incentive application, it's all right here. So it's in one great place that sends us, and it generates some of those reports that I showed you earlier. And within that also is our prospect tab. And so, for example, just those 29 businesses, we're still putting them in. We've only had this program for about 2 or 3 days, and so still kind of getting used to it. But again, within this, as you can see here, earlier today, I did send a template survey before we sent it out to those 1 businesses. And again, if I wanted to, I could email this business right here, right now, and it comes from my work email. So it doesn't come from a weird email. It comes from Clay.Mansell or anyone else. And again, Texa, our executive assistant, if she has an additional comment, she can add. We can all see it. It's really collaborative. And again, we can update their profiles as we need be. And so with our prospects, again, as we get someone who comes in, project, whatever, we can put them in as a prospect, conceptual, in progress, and we can update it there. And if eventually, if things go well and we secure them for our city, we can just move them to active, and then they are an active business in our community. And if we get that business directory function, they'll pop up right then and there, and we're good to go. And so you'll have to forgive some of the technical issues. I'm not used to doing a mouse and pad from a screen this far away, but I hope that kind of gives you guys a pretty good overview of some of the applications we have, how they work together, and how it's going to help us track businesses, track our metrics, and reach out to developers and secure more business for our city. So any questions?
It's very exciting. Glad to see that we have this information on board. And the coming from a background in business in terms of data, the only thing I would think about is analysis paralysis. It's immense amount of data. And if that data doesn't tell you something, the data is useless numbers. And so looking at all the data that you gave us on Placer AI, immense amount of data, how does that incorporate into your daily business activities in terms of making your job easier and better, rather than a piece of software becoming a burden?
Absolutely.
Which it can happen. It can happen. This is fantastic stuff. We're glad to see it. Just looking at that and saying, whoa, how much of it is usable in terms of propelling the city forward in economic development.
Absolutely.
So just a comment. Okay. All right. As I said, very exciting. Glad to see it, and a very worthwhile investment in you folks. Okay. Just a quick comment. We did not have an executive session, so item 5C, there was no executive session to report. So, moving on to item 6B, the Public Works Quarterly Report. Jackie Colton, please.
Good evening. Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the Duncanville City Council, City Manager, City Secretary, and the City Attorney in his absence. Oh, there is Attorney Hager, and our citizens. I am Jacqueline Colton, P.E., Assistant Director of Public Works, and I'm here tonight to share with you the Public Works fourth quarter report for FY21. There we go. Okay, I'm happy to announce that we have 3 new team members. We have Brian Burnett, who has joined the Streets Department as a maintenance worker. I would like to thank you all for increasing the minimum salary to $15 an hour. We really appreciate it. Okay, next of all, we have a new building permit tech by the name of Diana Ramirez. She's going to help Gus and his team do what they need to do as far as, assisting with economic development and new certificates of occupancy and building permits. Next, we have Mr. Ahmed Alami, who has joined us as our engineering intern. Actually, we're happy to report that he graduated on Friday with a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering. So he could be leaving us soon, but we're happy, you know, to have him aboard so far. Okay, there have been some organizational changes to Public Works. We've had 2 groups to be reassociated with different departments. One of them is the Planning and Zoning Division, as Gus has mentioned, which went to Development Services. And then our co-compliance team was reallocated to the newly created Neighborhood Services Group. However, Public Works continues to work very closely with these 2 groups to ensure economic development and growth and business opportunities continue to happen, as well as neighborhood quality of life is enhanced. So with that, we're down to 6 core public work functions. They consist of engineering, building inspection, utilities operations, streets maintenance, traffic operations, and equipment services. So we're actually allocated about 60 FTEs, but we do have some vacancies which we'll discuss when we get to the appropriate pages. Okay, first up, engineering. Let's talk about recent accomplishments. There was a pipe bursting project that was completed very similar to the one which you all approved tonight. And so we talked about the advantages of pipe bursting, the fact that it's less disruptive to the street in that you don't have to, you know, excavate a large portion as you would with an open cut pipeline replacement. So that project was completed for a total cost of $1 million. Next up in engineering is we completed a retaining wall. We had a retaining wall which was failing due to erosion, and we completed a retaining wall and stormwater drainage improvement. So this is just an example of the wide variety of projects undertaken by the Public Works Department, in that we hire contractors to do the work, but we have to oversee the project and inspect and, make the payments and all of that. Next up is a water pipe bursting job in Briarmead. We pipe bursted approximately 1,000 linear feet of 8-inch water main. This was the first project that we had undertaken with the water pipe bursting, and it was challenging, and we learned a couple of things. But one of the things that we had to do with this project that is not done with wastewater is we had to ensure the residents did not go without water during the time that this was replaced. So a temporary water pipeline was put into place so that we could ensure that we served our customers continuously. Okay, our sanitation group, they administer our solid waste contracts and our landfill disposal contracts, and are in excess of 11,000 customer accounts, sanitation accounts. One of the things that they did was they participated in Operation Clean Duncanville in October. We had in excess of 300 participants to come through with their brush, with their bulky waste, with their electronic waste. We also had paper shredding services available, which was the most popular service that we had to provide. We do this like twice a year. The next event will be conducted in April of 2022, so mark your calendars. Okay, we wanted to provide a brief update on the Bun project, the fire station number 1. We're happy to complete about 95% of the construction documents. So we anticipate bringing a contract to council in the winter of 2022 for the construction of the project at an estimated cost at this time of $7.1 million. And then construction will begin in spring of 2022, and it's about a 2-year project. So we're happy that that project is moving forward.
Jackie, you mean 2023?
2024.
No, 2023, construction begins, because the contract is going to come to us in the winter of '22. Go back to that slide.
Okay, yes, sir. Okay, when I say winter of '22, that's the first quarter of next year, the winter. Yes, sir.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yes, no, you would be disappointed if we were gonna come before you in a year.
My mind is still on the other side of the world. The seasons are different.
I know, yeah, I know. We're just bones, meat and bones. We're not sexy like.
You just move forward.
Okay, I will. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay, going back to our sidewalk repair program that we have in place. We are prioritizing sidewalk repairs in the Marybrook Park neighborhood. And one of the things that we will do periodically, if a request comes in, we'll divert attention temporarily to other locations. We received a call from a resident who was having difficulty traveling Main Street at Cox Farms, and so our crews are currently making sidewalk improvements there. It was a physically challenged individual, so we're currently working there, and then but we'll be back in Marybrook Park. And then we have assessed, other areas that we need to make improvements in. So after Marybrook Park, we're going to move to Wheatland Road, and then to Marybrook Park Estates, and then Cockrell Hill Road. So that's the extent of our sidewalk repairs program, actually for FY22. And so a total of 47 sidewalk repairs were made, and we installed 6 barrier-free ramps. Okay, moving to utility operations. That division is currently allocated 21 FTEs. Currently, 15 positions are filled, so we have 6 vacancies that we are trying to fill. And these vacancies have impacted our ability to accomplish some of the secondary functions that we perform. For instance, looking at our valve exercise of 1,802, our goal was 901. We achieved 468. And we were short due to the manpower shortage that we currently have. But I would like to note that of those 6 vacancies we have 2 in the pipeline. And then we are working very closely with human resources to fill our positions. One of the things that I would like to note and I would like to highlight is even with the vacancies, we were able to ensure that our citizens received in excess of 1 billion gallons of water with a very low water loss rate. And also, you may recall that during Storm Uri, the city did not have to issue a boil water notice. There were 12 million people across the state that were operating under a boil water notice. However, due to, the expertise of the water utilities division, we didn't have to do that. So we're very, proud of all of our teams, and we just wanted to highlight that again. Okay, on this slide, our parameters include tanks cleaned of 7. Our goal was 3. We actually cleaned 2. The reason being is because these tanks are inspected prior to being cleaned, and only 2 required cleaning. And so miles of sewer main televised is also an area where we did not quite meet our goal to the manpower shortage. Okay, next slide. This slide deals with the sanitation call log. We've set a goal of 1% complaints, and so for with an exception in August, we met our goal. And actually, August exception is due to a COVID outbreak amongst the Republic staff. One thing I would like to note is that we are currently conducting a sanitation survey. 2,800 entries have been collected thus far. It closes December 31st, and next month we will be before you with the results of that survey. Okay, street maintenance. This is another area where we have vacancies that we're trying to fill. They are authorized 19 FTEs, and they currently have 14 of these positions filled. So this has impacted their ability to make utility cut repairs within 10 days of notice. But filling of potholes within 24 hours of notice, they are right on track with that. And then also, when it rains, we inspect all of the head walls to make sure that debris is not accumulated so that we can ensure that water is able to flow, to alleviate any type of flooding issues we might have due to the rain and debris. Okay, a number of contracts were approved earlier today related to traffic operations, and they are right on target with all of their goals. They have an annual goal to replace 3 traffic cabinets out of 35 every year. They completed that. The signalized intersection rewiring, the 4 intersections, that was completed. And then the school zone flashers, as well as traffic signal operational readiness. They met all of their goals. So because of them, we have some order, within the roadway. Okay, equipment services. One of the things that I would like to note is we've had difficulty in obtaining new vehicles, primarily due to COVID, as well as there is a chip shortage, a computer chip shortage for the new cars. So we've had a difficult time obtaining new vehicles, and it's still a challenge, that we will be addressing and confronting in the future quarters. Okay, this concludes my presentation. I would be glad to entertain any questions you all might have of me at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Colton. It's very informative, and looking at that, I'm thinking, sometimes I wonder, what do y'all do besides answer the complaints that we send you? Y'all are very busy people doing other things than the odd pothole
Yes,
here
sir.
and the odd leak there, but, you know,
Yes,
look at that, you all are busy every moment of every day and
Yes,
taking care
sir.
of our citizens. We appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cooks.
Hey, Ms. Colton, I also want to thank you and the Public Works Department for all you guys do. We did hear, I know you talked about the economic development piece was not as sexy, your part was not as sexy as the economic development piece, but we stand to the difference of that, because without you and without the staff of Public Work, there is no economic development. So we thank you for the more water piece you talked about. We thank you for the potholes within 24 hours. And we thank you for the school zones flashes that you're repairing. So thank all of the hard workers that's out there doing things that not everybody will do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. On behalf of my team, they work very hard, and we're very proud of them.
Okay, thank you. With the completion of our business, we are adjourned at 9:32. Thank you very much for all of your attention and participation tonight.